to them.
Yeah.
And the one for Michael Caine is to say,
Even come around. Okay, so boop a doop boop boop, and let me make sure everything is audible. That's the headset mic. Okay. Properties. And that's the headset property. Okay. So I think I need that one on. And then what's this one? Properties. Okay, I think it's good now. Yes, it's good. Okay. Hello. I pulled up the part 2 of the video series that I will try to get through. And then I will attempt to do the third one. You want to just go for it? I think this is part 2. Is this part 2? Hold on. Now I don't even know. Autism and friendship trauma. Wait, and then this one's... We looked at autism and friendship trauma, right? That's the first one we did. And then the next one was autistic versus autistic conflict resolution. I'm just going to watch that. Isn't that very my autism friend? How do I see this series? I had the series before, and now I don't know. Okay, well, let me watch this. Okay. All right. Oopsie, that's not it. Hold on, I have to put it through here. Okay, and then I have to share my screen. Okay. Yeah, let's just warm up with that, and then we'll goof around. Hopefully this will go faster. Maybe it'll go faster because there's less of us right now.
yes,
okay.
It absolutely will.
Okay, good. Okay, let's go.
This is not going to include the demonstration of the autistic to non-autistic friendship termination. I know people are waiting on that video. I really want to get it up tomorrow. I just realized I need to add further context as to what's going on. So I'm going to continue talking about autism and friendship trauma, this time by discussing the way our processing and communication styles create opposing methods of conflict resolution. For the time being, we're going to disregard all possible confounding variables that complicate the barrier created by neurotype. And this isn't to say that the other variables aren't important. This is because we need to understand each variable independently before we can understand what's going on when we add other variables. So in this video, we're going to talk about people who are mentally and physically well, have grown up in the same cultural context, maintain their baseline access to verbal communication when in distress, and are skilled in both communication and conflict resolution. And I know that might sound insane to be so specific about who we're talking about, but this is all to demonstrate that even if the stars aligned to put two perfectly compatible
this for a second. So the same culture context, this kind of assumes like a segregated Midwest-ish, or possibly some other country that has a very homogenous situation. Or so you're basically saying like, I am from a homogenous part of the United States, and if you are from a homogenous part of the United States, you have a problem because there's either like anti-Black sentiments or xenophobia involved in it. So I find that interesting to suggest that that's even possible as somebody who grew up in a context that you'd never shared that. Like we shared not sharing things. So it was, yeah. So I think that's kind of odd because it's like that excludes a lot of people actually. And I just think that's so strange. I think that's surreal. Unless she means something that I'm not catching on what she means by culture or a cultural context.
Well, sure. Like
Hmm.
the Japanese have a very different cultural context than any section of America,
Right. Exactly.
right?
Right.
Like especially the old. So she could just be referring to that.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's hard to say. Okay. All right. I'm just gonna keep going. And I wish she would supply her context, since that's part of the issue here, right? Is like she's embedded in the problem already. So yeah.
Autistic and non-autistic people together, the difference in their communication and processing styles is in itself a conflict that acts as a barrier to any kind of conflict resolution that may come up throughout their friendship. So first I'm going to talk about successful holistic conflict resolution, then I'm going to talk about successful autistic conflict resolution, and then we're going to talk about how when we put the two conflict resolution styles together, they become unsuccessful. So as feelings-based processors and feelings-first communicators who view exchanging a shared feeling as less intimate and therefore less threatening than information exchange, analytic in threat or analytic in conflict is going to default to the most natural and comforting communication option available to them. So in healthy holistic communication, if one friend has been hurt by the other, they're going to alert their friend to the conflict by increasing feeling and decreasing information exchange. This is communicated through tone, body language, and verbal communication. So the wounded holistic is going to pull away physically by leaning away or maybe crossing their body off to the other person by like crossing their legs and their arms, maybe avoiding eye contact or visibly tensing their body, all of which sends the signal that the wounded holistic is feeling disconnected and emotionally distant from their friend. Then they're going to alter their tone by limiting their expressivity, communicating that they no longer feel safe enough to fully express themselves in front of their friend. The specific tone that the wounded holistic chooses to change to does communicate a specific feeling, but the fact that there was a change from welcoming to unwelcoming.
Agree with the idea of specific feelings also because of the theory of constructed emotion. It's like I think the way that, again, like with my model, I'd be saying like, okay, the holistic person is checking in with global configurational cues that they've learned that are metaphors about spatial relationships. So they're using like interpretive dance almost of spatial relationships into their physicality, suggesting these things. So they're using gestures that, or occasionally speech that suggests their metaphor of spatial relationships and dynamics that we can't see because we don't have uncompromised grid cells, or grid cells are not developed. So hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Cool.
Welcome in. We're gonna try to power through this second video in the series that we took like 3 hours to get through for the first one. So I'm gonna do minimal interruption. So far we're at 2 minutes out of 9. So I'm gonna try to not interrupt and save my thoughts to the end. So I'll write them down. So then this is done. So welcome, and for 9 minutes we're gonna listen to this, and I will bite my tongue a whole bunch of times. Okay.
Signals insecurity and a broken connection. Lastly, the wounded holistic is going to limit their verbal contributions to conversation. Each shift is a red flag being waved by the wounded holistic that says, I'm feeling emotionally distant and dysregulated because of something that you did, which sucks because I really trust and care about you. I'm feeling hurt and generally insecure about the state of our relationship, and I'm requesting reassurance about our connection and our compatibility.
Let's go.
I no longer
Yeah, so when she says each shift, I forget what she said, but basically, there's an entire language of communicating through all this stuff like body language and emotions. Like the way emotions are used as a tool is part of communication. And I know this because I'm autistic and plural, and my experience of having emotions is very odd because like one part of me will be feeling the emotion, but another part of me that is like dissociated from that or distanced from it is like analyzing it and seeing like, so clearly in this moment I could see what this part of me is trying to do is signal to my wife that I was hurt because I don't feel able to do it with words. And, because of the issues in between us sometimes, I get stuck there just being in that emotion and body language and everything and expecting that to be noticed as if I was speaking because I act as though it's language. Does that make any sense?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I'd argue, I guess what I would say is that I think that we have embodied experiences of like something is painful or something feels unsafe. There's some sort of a threat condition, and those are based on a lot of different factors, like physical factors as well as kind of like symbolic factors. So I would say that like our emotions are symbolic, and it's a very fast way to say to ourselves like I don't think this is going to end well, and it will escalate or create additional problems that will become physical or at least feel physical at this time, like energy being able to be regulated. Now we're not actually going to think in those terms. We're not that conscious of like our metabolism, but we have some problem with our metabolic needs, and we need to like fix that. And my concern is that like with holistic people saying like, oh, they're not talking about ideas anymore, they're just talking through their feelings or like only expressing feelings and not sharing ideas. It's like, no, they're sharing a specific kind of idea that depended on global configurational awareness. So that's where I kind of like, I don't disagree that like we are communicating with our feelings and that feelings are expressive. My problem is that I think autistic people also have feelings that are constantly at play, but we talk about our feelings differently because we didn't learn to use the metaphor of the global configurational space to understand our feelings, because we can't, because we don't understand that space.
In fact, our feelings have to be different because there are things that our mind can't do in the same way, right? So like our very feelings are different.
Yes.
But I guess the point I was trying to get at is that the disconnect that will arise when an autistic person is in the conversation comes from an inability to notice the importance of certain pieces of data in the context of that moment.
Right. I agree with that. Yeah.
Like if I'm reacting the way, like I still react the same way she's describing holistic people as reacting, right? Like I have emotional reactions, body language reactions that could possibly be interpreted by somebody because I learned that this is the way to react in these circumstances. But the issue that I have is that other people, like holistic people, can't tell because they don't know me and my specific type of reactions, which are abnormal.
Right.
And my wife, who's autistic, even though she could learn my reactions because she's aware that I have different ones, and that's how autism works. She's not able to, in the moment, notice, especially because what ability to do global configurational context building and noticing everything we have, it evaporates the moment like stressors are pushed upon us. And right, when we go from like there's something about like vagal nerve states or something.
Oh yeah, vagal tone.
I only vaguely learned about. Right, but like when I'm shifted out of the normal one, my ability to pick up on so many things is just gone because I'm in this other mode of like emergency and only notice these things.
Right. And I also think like it's important to think that like autistic people end up being one of one, like where everybody's one of one, okay? But autistic people don't learn this shared language in the same way that like, so if you have I go back to sight because I do think this is actually fundamentally connected to visual processing. If you have people that are congenitally blind, they are not going to share the language of visual symbolism. They're not with other people. So you not only can you not do like really obvious ones that everyone can see what it means, or even abstract ones that everyone disagrees on what it means, they can't do this like really dynamic, sophisticated interaction with people, and that's also what we're missing. So my problem with the phrasing in the video is she's creating this like inverted process when I'm like, no, we don't have the ability to actually understand what they're saying to each other because we could never see it to begin with, to go down to this sophisticated level that people are exchanging information in. And to your point, when we are trying to exchange information, we have way less strategies available to us just by virtue of us not being the majority, not running into each other very much, not getting to develop our own methods that work, and being able to like kind of play test them together, which is why I like this group and why I think exercises like this are important. And there's value in acknowledging that, like, we have less tools to deal with the state that we end up at a crisis and everything that ramps up to the crisis. We don't have interventions earlier on before it becomes a crisis. And because this is so hard to understand due to the nature of the problem in our brain, other people can also be antagonistic when we are trying to come up with solutions. It's like, why don't you just see the picture? It's like, we don't have that ability. Okay, may I continue? Okay, let's go for it.
I feel secure about the state of our relationship. I no longer feel safe enough to bring it up to you, and I need an emotional signal that it actually is safe and we are cool and you do want to hear what I have to say. Then the realistic friend, as another feelings-based processor and feelings-first communicator, is going to recognize these feelings as signals of distress and know what's being said without any further explanation. They're also going to know that they're going to need to extend feelings of safety and connectedness for their friend to be able to tolerate the emotional distress of telling them something negative. So the friend is going to use body language to communicate emotional closeness and safety by decreasing physical distance.
Yes.
She's talking about feelings first processors, but I think really what she's identified is that they are people who have a working ability to notice feelings in the normative way, and an ability to, and their own feelings are normative. And another thing, like, they know what to do when they notice people's feelings.
They're
in a normative way, all coming from their global configuration, understanding of the world and culture and everything, right?
Exactly. They're speaking a common symbolic language that relies on the grid cells working, and you being able to use global configurational language. So their feelings over their lifetime have been translated into this language, but it's still a symbol. Like, the moon pointing at the moon is not the moon. So like it's dynamic in that, like, this has shifted how they deal with these feelings, which are basically like aspects of being a human being with metabolic needs and social environments, yada yada. So like we've lived in a different situation because we either lack completely the ability to see these things, or we see them at such low resolution that we could never understand the symbolic language to begin with. So it's frustrating because then the idea is that, like, we are not leading with our feelings, I think that's nonsensical, because our feelings are just like us checking in with our body. We are checking in with our body, but we can't tell people about it easily because we don't share the symbolic language about what it is to be in your body, noticing your body.
So, like, what she's saying is analogous to being like, and so the holistic person, as a French speaker, will speak in French.
Right.
And then the other holistic, as another French speaker, will understand that their friend has spoken things in French, and then they will communicate and fix things.
Yes.
Right. That's where the disconnect actually is.
Yes.
Is that autistic people don't have the language of emotional body communication that non-autistic people are able to build up.
Right. And that analogy is helpful because there are studies about how someone's native language will change like how they process certain events. So like your language can alter how your brain develops. So this is saying that like global configurational is a kind of language that is hidden from the users of the language. And autistic people cannot learn that language because we lack in a neurological sense the ability to be aware of the materials the language is made out of. And it's a little more complex than that because this is so fundamental to how we move about in the world that this isn't, it's beyond just language. It gets into all kinds of issues of like being able to do anything. I mean, it's beyond that, but it also kind of works to indicate that there's an analogous problem.
And so what I find interesting is rather than being unable to learn the language, I would posit that it's that we're just unable to as reliably learn it and execute it in as robustly. Because if you took all the same cues of this kind of language that I don't notice in real life, but you put the same ones into a TV show, which very much guides your attention to these cues, all of a sudden I can understand what's going on in these contexts, right? And things that I wouldn't normally. But what it is that I'm not able to process and experience a whole lot of different types of things at once, right? And I think that makes sense with the global configurational issue. And this would explain like why it's so helpful to close my eyes to focus on a conversation, because I then can just, right, it's like all this extra stuff actually reduces my capability to process, to perceive meaning in the other type of sensation.
And I also, so this will get into what I want to talk about also today, is I have this acronym that I'm working on. I'll bounce this off of you more as we go forward. But basically that like part of the problem is I think since we process things episodically, like we go into our memories to then establish context, because establishing context with global configurational is not going to work. And hasn't worked, so it's not what we developed. So I think what happens is we get the information, we're locked onto the place cell that we need, and then we need to go into our memory and our stored information and then put it into context of our stored information. So if we keep our eyes open, it's possible that we'll get cued to go into a different stored pattern that may be irrelevant to the one that we would like to work on right now. So there's probably a couple things in the environment that could pull our attention, and we have the resources to contribute that new information and integrate it into our old information, which means we have to go into our head to do that. And if we can't do two of those at the same time, broadly speaking, unless they're so closely related, we can bounce back and forth between them. So I think that like right now my thinking is that like basically this will get into motivation, but it's like new information comes in, it immediately gets connected to the old information in our brain, in our memory, and possibly even our imagination. And then the interpretation occurs, and then an action follows from that. Instead of what I think is happening with autistic people, where there's new information all around them, and then they hierarchically organize that information in real time and can do more interactions that are they're kind of like context independent. They're context dependent in the immediate environment, but they're more context independent in like long-term patterns. So they aren't thinking about like, I want to say this is where we can get resentful and say, oh, they're not thinking about the consequences, or they're not thinking about how this impacts other structures. So they're extrinsically motivated instead of intrinsically motivated. So I think there's like lots of ways we can resent that, but it's like it's just a skill that is obvious if you have the apparatus in your brain to do it, to like they've been doing it together their whole lives. And so I can't see the value in it. And sometimes I worry about autistic people speculating too hard on the value of that. And that I'm kind of going off the rails a little bit, but that we like, it's not that, because some I saw something recently that said like, oh, we're taking in more information. No, we're not. We are taking in less information with higher quote unquote priority on recursive information. We even understand priority differently because it's not hierarchical, it's recursion. So then we're locked into things that we're like, that occurs a lot, that occurs a lot, that occurs a lot. And then now we're in our memories. So the information, most of the information we're processing is stored information, is what I would argue, not real-time information.
Right. And so an autistic person saying like, oh, we take in more information is like a blind person saying, oh, we take in more information because everything I always ever talk about is real things that that I've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And these other people are wasting all this time talking about things that don't matter and don't exist. But what we're talking about is colors and paintings and light.
Right.
And no, that is important, right?
Right.
Like, that is useful information. Mm-hmm. But from the perspective of someone to which this is nothingness, it
exactly.
Like a lack of information, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right, let's power through.
Trying to make more eye contact and maybe even establishing physical contact with their wounded friend. They're then going to alter their tone to communicate safety, genuineness, tenderness, and concern for the friend's feelings. Doing this should reestablish enough of a shared positive feeling between the friends that the friend now feels comfortable to engage in negative, genuine information exchange, allowing the two to discuss and resolve their conflict. Once the friends have overcome this negative experience, they feel more connected than before, feel more confident about their ability to overcome conflict in the future, and like their relationship has been strengthened overall. So simply put, healthy holistic communication starts with a shared negative feeling, which needs to be met by a shared positive feeling, so that both parties and the relationship itself can tolerate negative information exchange. When it comes to healthy autistic conflict resolution, there actually really isn't any research, at least not that I've been able to find. So the description I'm about to provide isn't a summary of research, but a hypothesis informed by how research and actual autistic people describe autistic brain functioning and nervous system functioning and interpersonal communication with other autistic people. So I think, as information-based processors who view exchanging information as less intimate than engaging in a shared feeling, an autistic in conflict, the same as an allistic in conflict, is going to default to the communication style that comes most naturally to them and with the least amount of nervous system dysregulation, which is information-based communication. So in healthy autistic communication, if one friend hurts the other, the wounded autistic is going to alert their friend to the presence of conflict by decreasing shared feeling and increasing information exchange. I do believe autistic people establish shared feeling through body language and tone. However, current research suggests that because each autistic experience is so unique and our presentations of autism are so varied, that there is no identifiable pattern to autistic body language. And research does acknowledge the pattern in autistic extremes, and I think that's because of the way our emotions present themselves physically when we're experiencing extreme joy or extreme distress. However, I think that there is a pattern to the smaller intricacies of autistic body language, and allistic researchers have simply not picked up on what that pattern is yet because they just haven't practiced looking enough, and also autistic people are going to be more likely to notice a pattern in autistic behavior than allistic people, in part because
I'm gonna add on to just here and then I'll keep moving. So when she says like there's maybe a pattern to autistic like joy and distress, maybe, but then it's like it kind of depends on how many default pathways does the brain have if it's missing this information that people create a shared symbolic language with, and then they speak in the shared symbolic language. So obviously, I think you have an immediate problem there, but you do have something like, for example, if somebody, again, has, like, let's say they're congenitally deaf, they do not speak like somebody, when they do learn to speak, which some people do, they do not speak like somebody who is not. And you'll get some variations of like how people do that, but it is possible, and people learn it in a different way entirely if they are going to speak. And also, it's not, that's actually maybe a good analogy, and then I'll move on. It's also not really super for the benefit of the congenitally deaf person to speak. It's to make sure that things are smoother with people who can. So if we do regulate how we express different states of the body and cope with it and regulate ourselves, we still would be changing it for the benefit of people not being confused by us, as opposed to you know, as opposed to like, we're basically, I don't think we're going to come up with a common symbolic language between autistic people. I think it's going to be, and in so much as we do, it'll rely on another faculty that's available for us to use that creates symbolic languages that we might share, which I don't know. So I don't know. It's just, I think that, I don't know. There's more. I'm going to leave that. Okay, we can keep going. Sorry. It made sense and then I went too far. Okay, I'll shut up.
We have better pattern recognition skills, but mostly because autistic people are going to be able to understand autistic people better than allistic people. On top of that, I think that it's going to be really difficult to identify an inherently autistic form of body language, both because it's naturally human to pick up each other's habits and adopt each other's body movements, and because through masking, we work so hard at trying to replace our autistic traits with allistic traits that we often forget what is natural to us. And so I think at this point in time, it's difficult to identify what body language is ours. I also wonder if, as information-based processors, if our body language is more for us than for other people, and if maybe that's the cause for the variance in the way autistic people use body language, that it is actually unique to each of us. Like our brain and our nervous system.
So again, like somebody who's congenitally deaf, most people vocalize when they're happy and sad, including congenitally deaf people, and it's really for them. I would agree with that part. Okay.
Consciously use our body movements to help assess how we're feeling, and maybe part of the autistic struggle in identifying our emotions is caused by our masking efforts suppressing our natural body movements and replacing them with the body movements of an allistic, which we don't know how to interpret without further explanation. I don't know. All of that is to say, I don't have an example of how body language changes when autistic people are in conflict because we just don't know. So going back to the topic at hand, when autistic people are in conflict, we're going to pause our feelings connection because our nervous system no longer feels safe enough to maintain it, and we now need an emotional barrier between us and our friend. We're then going to state explicitly that something is wrong and act to engage in dialogue to create shared understanding. We need to be sure that we fully understand each other's intentions and perspectives before coming to a conclusion about how we're feeling. So this information exchange is what helps our nervous systems know what we're feeling and how to share it with the other person. We always have an initial emotional reaction, and we always have an initial emotional assessment of the other person's feeling, but we don't want to latch onto that emotion if it isn't appropriate and proportional to what's going on. So we need the information to determine the feeling, and then we need to determine the feeling to be able to let ourselves feel it to a proportional extent, and most importantly, we need to be able to complete this assessment process to let the feeling move through and out of our bodies. And without the information,
I'll say, so the info, she says that we need the info to determine the feeling, and I would argue that we need local featural information that is both immediate and also stored. We need to connect those things, and then we make a guess about why we're experiencing a feeling, because all of it is guessing, and that people without autism, allistic people, who are generally normal, are using global configurational information to make that guess about why they're having certain feelings. So it's, if you go to the predictive coding model of the brain and you go into the theory of constructed emotions, basically we're making an educated guess, why do I feel something? And for allistic people, they're using global configurational symbolic language and communication that they've refined over their entire lives, and we don't have that. So we are then using local featural to determine what we are feeling, and that requires us to work with that information, which is what is actually happening. So yeah, so I don't know, and we work with that information in terms of what's happening now and what's happened in the past to make a model of like what the fuck is going on, because we're missing the grid that puts it all in context. Okay, all right, we're at 7:36. We're almost done.
Information, we get stuck. We also process feelings better and more effectively when we do it with someone else.
What did we
and
get
this
stuck?
goes for everyone. So to sum stuck. We also process feelings better and more effectively when we do it with someone else. Complete this assessment process to let the feeling move through and out of our bodies. And without the information, we get stuck. We also process feelings better and more effectively when we do it with someone else, and this goes for everyone. So to summarize my idea of what I think healthy autistic conflict resolution looks like, the wounded autistic friend will pause their feeling, which the other autistic will pick up on. The wounded autistic will initiate an open dialogue of information exchange, and the two will discuss until they come to a mutual understanding of what went wrong, why, the extent of the pain it caused, and what this means for the relationship going forward. Once the two establish that they both understand what's going on, their nervous systems will feel regulated enough to begin engaging in shared feeling. The intensity of the shared feeling will grow as a conversation goes on, and by the time the two are discussing the extent of the pain that this wound has caused, they are engaging in full feeling exchange. So you can see when we cross the two neurotypes, we have an autistic who really needs to establish a shared feeling of safety and connectedness through shared feeling first. And if this shared feeling of safety and connectedness isn't first established, they're going to assume that their friend is not feeling safe and connected, is maybe feeling hostile, and maybe even hurt them intentionally. And as feelings-based processors and feelings-first communicators, hearing words without the feeling to back it up sounds like lying. And then we have an autistic who feels like they're saying all of the right things and getting all of the wrong results, because establishing a shared feeling is just too intimate to do right up front during conflict. And for autistics who communicate and process with information, if we notice a change in our friend's behavior suggestive of negative feelings toward us, and we see they don't want to explain, we assume it just must not be a big enough deal to talk about, or that you need more time to figure out what you want to say, and you'll bring it up when you're ready. So autistic and allistic people, because of their difference in neurotype, their difference in communication styles, processing styles, and conflict resolution styles, have to overcome this impasse at the very beginning of conflict to figure out a conflict resolution style that works for the both of them so their relationship can last successfully and healthily long term. And now, with all that being said, I can upload the demonstration video feeling like I've given enough context to understand why it's happening.
Because I disagree with her explanation for why it's happening, but that's, you know, like that is, I've already made that pretty clear. So this is a conflict resolution. How long is this?
Okay, now that we understand the difference between autistic.
Okay, so that's 9 minutes. Okay, so that's clear enough that, like, I don't mind her observations. I don't agree with the explanation as to why it's happening and exactly what is happening. And I also don't like the inverted dichotomy, which I think autistic people are prone to, because our species is currently locked into like this kind of dualistic what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a Hegel's concept. Oh my gosh, I can't think of it. Dualistic. It's another thing too. Dialectic. This dialectic relationship of like foreground, background, inverted expression, mirror images, all this stuff. So it's like that. This idea that we go in the opposite direction of them is a problem, because I also think it creates the same thing that makes us think like, oh, I'm not like other people, therefore I'm the opposite of a person, therefore I'm a robot, therefore I don't have the qualities that people have, I have the opposite. If they have something, I don't have it. If they don't have it, I do have it. I'm an angel, I'm a demon, I'm a ghost, I don't really exist, I'm an imagination. So it kind of like cycles into that as well, where we're like, I'm the inversion of a person, which is not a good way to understand our disability for us or for other people, because like I just think it's harmful. Yeah, let's get some proper line of communication. Yeah, I've been wonky. Thanks, Blink is in chat. I was just mentioning that to her. Okay, there's so much assumption. Yeah, so okay, do we want to do the last 9 minute, or should we take a break and just like check in? Maybe check in? Am I still here? I am, okay.
I can hear you. I've just been putting stuff in the chat.
I saw your text also. I need to get back to you as well. Okay, and
we can chat about that later.
Yeah, sounds cool though.
But
yay.
Yeah, I will. Yes.
Okay, let's go over to chat land. I'm gonna drag this over here. Okay. Yeah, okay, I like this. Yeah, I like the feeling, the needing a signal that it's safe. So, and this is where I think that autistic people are constantly feeling like we're literally lost. Like we don't have enough information to know where we are, because we don't have the damn grid cells in the first place. And so the kinds of information that we need in order to be like, oh, this is where I am. And uncertainty is just generally not good, but particularly not good when you don't have a sense of where you are. Okay, I'm gonna get caught up in the chat. And also like a safe place to discuss, like I think a safe place means like if you suddenly feel lost and don't know where you are, we will try to fix that if possible. And even if we can't fix it, we'll make an attempt to get that so that you know that we'd like to fix that problem for you. Hi, Blink.
Hey, sorry if I interrupted what you were saying. Just wanted to make sure it was like.
Yeah,
able
sounds
to
good.
be heard.
You are heard. You're coming in nice and clear.
What is the general topic? I kind of joined midstream, so I don't know what exactly is going on, but I do want to share my opinion.
Yeah, so basically we were looking at a TikTok, and this is a woman who's autistic and has some sort of a psychology background and degree, and I think she's also working in research. She offers an idea about conflict resolution between autistic and autistic people and difference in communication style. I agree with a lot of her observations to a point, but her explanation I disagree with. So some of this is kind of refining my model of autism. But the main topic is this idea that sometimes I think autistic people interpret aulistics as doing a very different process to relate to the world and other people than they really are. And when we try to speculate as to what's going on with them, we can reinforce some unhelpful ideas and models. So the main one is this idea that like she thinks that autistic people are feelings-based processors, and that they will, when they have a conflict, share negative feelings, share positive feelings, and then they'll allow themselves to have negative information exchange, saying that like it's more intimate for them to share information. And she contrasts that like it's moving in the opposite direction, saying that autistic people have to exchange negative information, I guess positive information, I'm not sure about that, and then we share our feelings, which I disagree completely with that model. And I also think it reinforces this idea of seeing autistics like within ourselves as being the opposite of people. Like we just do everything backwards, which is not what's actually happening. Yeah. And I wanted to kind of like open up that discussion a bit so we can work on a better model.
I don't get all of that. Some of the terms you use went over my head.
Yeah, it's a little psychology heavy too. Like, and I'm not a psychologist, but I've been around that language a lot. I think like the easier way to say it is like there's an idea that's going around because this TikToker is sharing it, and probably other people are sharing it, that autistic people are speaking to each other in how they feel, and that autistic people are speaking to each other in what information we have. And I don't think that's true. I think autistic people are talking to each other in this global configurational, which I talk about as a grid, that they can see the grid like literally in a visual sense, and that grid that they impose on space to know spatial relationships is also how they have social relationships, and the information they're exchanging is a symbolic interpretation of this skill that their brain can do with physical space. So basically like their social relationships are like a metaphor for their relationship to physical space, which we as autistic people don't share. And that we as autistic people would use the strategy of looking at specific information because we can't put it in this spatial context. We don't have that. And then that's what we're actually exchanging, are these specific points of information that we pay a lot of attention to, such as our special interests. And we use that to figure out where we are, what's going on, while we are blind to this map of information that autistic people used since they were babies. and so it's
Mhm.
developed into this really sophisticated symbolic language that they're exchanging with each other. So
Mhm.
that's the model I'm trying to get. But it's you see how like technical it is, and it's not
Yeah.
it's not super easy to visualize or imagine, because it's really abstract. But I think that's how our brain actually works. So I want to try to make that more accessible, and have
Mhm.
better ways of explaining it. So some of this is me testing out that, but also like I have like an alternate explanation than what she was suggesting in the video we were watching on TikTok.
Okay. Interesting. I can relate to the whole sharing information rather than feelings. I have a tendency to do that. Like, if I'm close to the person, I can be like, yeah, this is how I'm feeling. I'm feeling like stressed. I'm feeling this. I'm feeling that. But if it's just someone I know in class, I'm like, hey, this is related to an interest of yours.
Yes.
You might like this information, stuff like that.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, like my feelings are not translated into a language that everybody is using. My feelings are translated into specific objects a lot of times, but also it's like I I found my own way to interpret my feelings without learning that from other people the way that you would as an holistic person. They basically learn how to talk about their feelings by using this skill they have of global configurational reasoning. So they use that skill, which is like a visual skill, and it's like a movement skill. It's a very embodied skill. It's like a basic mechanic that mammals have. So they're using that to then explain their feelings, right? And so I can't use that. And the analogy is like somebody who is congenitally blind cannot use visual mediums to explain their feelings. They don't share the language of like cinema or of classical art or of dance. They don't share that, at least visually. So they can't use that communication form. And that's what I think is the problem with us. So for us to try to explain our feelings to somebody, it's like, do you have 3 hours? Like let me try to explain how I've come up with this makeshift language that works for
Maybe that's
me.
why I avoid talking about my feelings with my therapist so much.
Exactly. No, I think that would track.
Because, like, I mostly talk to him about, like, movies and TV, and only sometimes I'm like, my feelings.
Right.
Oh my gosh. I'm looking. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And the mom gets on my case about that. She's like, you need to use your therapist properly. You need to talk to him about your feelings. I'm like, I'm trying.
Mm.
Because my mom is
Yeah.
partly holistic.
Hmm.
You were saying? Sorry for
Yeah. Oh no, sorry for like interrupting you. I don't know.
No.
Yeah,
I should have known that you were going to speak. I'm sorry.
no, honestly, like a group this big with camera off is just like tough to signal that we're talking and know that people are done. Like it might be easier to like say in the chat that we have something to say, but
Yeah,
at least
like
I'm
maybe
um
if there a way to do camera off on Zoom, because Zoom has this thing where you can like raise your hand.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know like there are the emojis here. But I don't know like if they stay up long enough. But yeah, basically what I wanted to say was that I'm shopping for a therapist right now and I'm finding it really hard um because it's like you pay by the session and I feel like it's going to take forever to get a sense for if someone understands my communication style and my background and like all these different things that they need to understand. And so sometimes I'm like, maybe I'll wait a couple months until I have my story straighter, until I have like a more concise narrative, which isn't how it should be. And like
Yeah,
I'm
like
looking for yeah, go ahead.
the whole your story straighter, to take that quote, it's interesting because, like, do we really need to have our story straight just to, like, we do need to have the basic details of, like, here is what you need to know about us, but, like, that whole idea, how much of ourselves do we need to figure out in order to really communicate with others, I guess would be a good question for the group.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I think it really depends on the situation.
Mhm.
And that in a lot of situations, like we can, like the biggest thing I ask for is often space.
Mhm.
And then like to go meet my own needs, but like for trying to have relationships where people can like engage on a deeper level and like co-regulate more or like help me process my feelings, it's really hard to get to that point. And I have a lot of friendships where like I'll listen to what's going on in their life for hours and help them process it, but they can't do the same for me.
Oh. Hmm. I try to be that way, but more often I end up being the person who's like, I'm having an issue. Mind if I tell you about it?
Good for
And
you.
what'd you say?
I said good for you.
So, like, if you ever need a shoulder, I'm here to listen.
Oh, that's really sweet. Thanks, McWave.
You're welcome. Just trying to help. That's what I do.
Aw.
So I'm gonna take the reins a tiny bit and say the chat, the topic that I put, or the topic I put on screen was like, wanted to talk more about doing type A and doing type B. So my theory of motivation, and that I think sometimes when we have a conflict with somebody or we have a problem, like for example, talking to a therapist, and it's like, oh, I'm not getting to what I actually want to talk about, is that they want doing type A information from us. So they still are wanting us to translate how I think we work, which is doing type B. Doing is building instead of doing is arriving. So they want to know about our goals. They want to know about our what's the word, barriers. There's another word for that. But you know what I mean? Like there's metaphors that already assume that you think of yourself as moving through a linear path to a destination. So they want to know about setbacks. They want to know about these sorts of things.
Obstacles?
Obstacles. Yes,
Yeah.
obstacles. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to say, well, I want to build this thing, but I'm having a lot of problems because I don't have enough structural support to build the thing. How do I get the structural support? And the answer can be do a lot of arriving goals, and then you'll get a fancy trophy, and then they'll give you money, and then you can build the thing. It's like I want an answer that isn't that, because that one's insane, and I'm not doing that, and I can't do that, and I'm not. So when we talk to therapists, like what they're asking us to do is translate our experience into something they can work with, instead of them knowing how to work with an autistic person, where it's like you can't translate this. It's not translatable. So I'll get back to my current working model, is that autistic motivation is 4 things if I really break it down, and these 4 things can translate across like allistics as well. It's not that allistics cannot do this and aren't doing this, but they are also using this global configurational thing where they're much more in the current moment than we are. And they're checking in with each other about the current status of hierarchies, the current status of priorities. And then we're told we need to put our attention towards figuring out the hierarchies and the priorities when we literally can't. So what I think we should do is new information, old information, interpretation, action. And I ended up making that even more simple to say, this is how we form motivation. If you are not doing this, this is why you are not motivated. First, you have to find the new things. So look at the new things. There are new things every day, right? We know that context is changing over time. So check in with the new things. Immediately let your brain go to the old things. So new thing or things, new thing, old thing or things, you're in your brain again, connecting it and seeing how it makes contextual sense. I'm going to give a metaphor in a minute to explain this too. And then you do a form of combining and creating a new meaning based on the new things and old things. So you integrate them. So new things, old things, all things do things. Now that you have the all things, now you know what to do. Now you have some impetus because now you know what to build is for us. So the way I think of it is, instead of it being this starting point, ending point, which you can also think of as binary thinking in general. So that would be, I call a light switch binary thinking. And I think it also...
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Jane, I'm going to be right back. Have to eat some food.
Oh yeah, go take care of body need. Good. Okay, so so where was I going? So old things, if you think of in binary, sometimes are better than new things, sometimes are worse than new things, but they're never really integrated into a whole. So it's like a light switch where somebody goes from down to up. So you're going forward in time is probably up is positive. Sometimes it's down if you feel like you're getting old and your best days are behind you. So it's everything is just like, I'm going towards something. Even if you install a dimmer switch, it's just this metaphor of moving linearly through time to a new destination. I don't think that works for autistic people, because the global configurational is just impaired or not functioning and never has been. So we don't speak with that metaphor. And if we have a therapist or anybody else put pressure on us to speak with that metaphor, now we have to try to translate what we're actually doing into something we literally can't do. And I don't think that will ever work. So instead of that, so imagine you have an infinite straw that is filled with resin. So you have this resin-filled straw. It starts at the beginning of time, and it keeps extending as time extends. So this is now our idea of time. You could move linearly along that straw. Inside of this resin is embedded shapes that represent events, phenomenon, anything that has occurred. And there's also, I would add on, speculative events. So somebody's standing on the side with a little holographic laser beam projecting something into that resin that may not even in fact be there. So we keep moving forward in time. We have these embedded objects. The autistic person has to go top down and look down the straw through the resin to see the shapes that are emerging dynamically. So we need to know, oh, here's the new information. Where's all the old information? And nobody has a complete map of information, right? Your straw is very individual in what objects are embedded. If you aren't aware of it, it's maybe impacting you, but you don't know why. So we have like vague shapes, we have definite shapes, we have projected shapes, and we look down from the top and see the dynamic shape of it all. So that's autism. And I also think it's a useful skill that people should do more often, because it would help with abstract reasoning. And I think that's why capitalism is so shit for autistic people. It's shit for everyone, but it's so shit for autistic people, because we aren't going to go down the linear path to make meaning. We have to flip the straw, look down it, and now we start to make meaning. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. There's my lecture. I hope that makes sense. I'm having a hard time getting it as clear as I want it to be, because I'm still working on this. Like it's a hypothesis that I'm building into models that can explain the concept instead of just like swimming in it. Like we're kind of like fish that don't know we're wet. Like we've never heard of water, and we keep being like, man, what are we swimming through? And we have all these goofy ideas about what it is.
Yeah. I think all of that resonates, and for me, like the reason I didn't have like 5 things to say to it was actually because you did such a good job. Like my kind of one thing that I see happening that ties to this is to be able to engage at one part of the straw without understanding the rest of it. Basically, you got to be speaking the same cheat codes which allow for brushing things under the rug as everyone else. And I'm not saying that people are intentionally brushing things under the rug. I'm just saying that if they happen to see things closely enough to the people around them, then that just happens. And then when someone comes in who needs to understand like some other stuff to be able to make sense of what people are doing at this place in the straw, then it's like, hey, but when you put this together with this old thing, this model falls apart. And yeah, that goes back to
Right.
other stuff we talked.
Right. Like people will be like, well, no, we're not going to go any further down the straw. So even if you get somebody saying like, maybe they'll try to do that top down look, they'll be like, no, but I'm going to slice the straw right off at 1950. Bam. And that's what it means. And you're like, so keep going. And then you'll watch that shape change. And then the overall shape will clearly show that there's a different thing occurring here, that this is not reality. Like we're trying to map reality and what things actually mean. What is the actual meaning? And so if somebody's selective and they're also slicing it off where it's like, oh, that's not only are you slicing it at a weird spot, that's mostly projections. And I can even like go the route of analyzing it critically and being like, okay, let's look at the linear straw. Where's the person projecting onto it? Oh, there they are. What's their deal? You know, and then you start to, this is where the metaphor starts to get more challenging to visualize. But you see what I'm saying? Where it's like, oh, you wanted that to remain to a true model. You wanted that model to succeed. But if you keep looking up, go down the straw longer and then flip and look down, top down view, it clearly failed. It fails right here. This gets into like this problem of like, I think the main issue autistic people have currently is that we can't build and reinforce and nurture our motivation. And if anything, we are being discouraged or interrupted when we try to use our form of motivation and being told, but you don't have a goal. But you're not looking down the length of the straw towards, you know, you're not lengthwise on the straw moving towards this, that, or the other. Why aren't you with us looking at the lengthwise version of the straw? And I'm like, well, that's just not how I process information. And if you keep dealing with people who are standing on the side of the straw, projecting, right? Maybe they're trying to make sure they know what's really in the straw, but maybe they're just projecting. I'm like, y'all are doing so too much. Like, just look at the whole of what you're making. Why are you doing this? Where did it come from? Right? You don't even necessarily have to project like where is it going, although that you'll start to have predictions, right? Like things become recursive. Things become bounded by the rules that reality actually has instead of the ones we say it has. And if you look at something long enough, you should, and under the right conditions where you're not biasing yourself somehow or distorting it, but if you're looking at a pattern long enough, your biases start to fall away. You can't sustain them because it's like, oh, that collapsed. That's gone. That disappeared. That did not behave the way that I said it would or they said it would. It started behaving differently, and why? And then you have to respond to those behaviors. And I feel that way about autism as well, where it's like we aren't behaving the way people think you have to succeed. And I'm saying we are disabled at behaving that way. So if that's your only concept of success, what? And also bullshit. Because people very well know that doing this top-down thing is important. Otherwise, we wouldn't esteem intellectuals or scientists or artists or anybody that gives us a chance to reflect on how things connect and the actual pattern of reality, as opposed to like some slice, some moment in time of reality that out of context. So it's funny to me that like we'll get presented as not having context, but we're looking for a different kind of context. We're stuck using a different kind of context. And if you don't teach good abstract reasoning skills, autistic people may not realize that that's a very important skill that does get recognized by society. Does it lead to monetary rewards right now? I don't think so. I don't know how to get it to. At least I'm confused by how to do that. But just for your own sanity, you are understanding an important aspect of reality if you work with how your brain actually can process information, even though there was a disability that knocked out one way of processing information. Okay.
Yeah, you had mentioned like therapists and basically everybody wants us to have goals, expects us to have goals, and so it's about that.
Mhm.
But what I find is that like the analogous, like the closest analogous thing is that I have needs and wants, and so like magic, like reaching the point where those are met becomes the only sort of goal that I could explain in these circumstances, right? So I'm like, oh, well, like, I guess I have the goal of making some more money, but that's not a goal that I have. I have the goal, like, I need more money to be supported properly, but I actually have zero motivation to do anything that makes money. I think money is itself a destructive concept that's leading humans to extinction. Like, why would I actually have a goal, or what I actually want to do is earn money, right?
Wow. I relate so hard to that. And I feel like nowadays, like things in society, like people have always been expected to do messed up things where they like let go of pieces of their humanity. But it used to be like you show up to the factory and you can start working right away. Versus now it's like you got to bet on which random skill to develop so it can be monetarily rewarded 5 years from now. And you got to be able to somehow create an environment where you can focus to do that without your needs being met. So someday your needs might be able to be met. And going off of what you were saying, Jane, about how to potentially like make deeper context, broader context rather than goal context understanding monetizable. I think one barrier to that right now is how much it happens for free. And like when I'm looking for work, a lot of the times I've ran into this issue where I'll be interviewing or like being considered, sometimes it's more informal in the startup world, for working with someone, and they'll love my big picture ideas. But what they really want is someone who can make global configurational happen really, really well. And whatever bigger context understanding they have is an added bonus. And then at that point, I've sometimes like given people so much for free because I'm just like, well, I don't want this product to be built in a way where it's leading to dynamics where people hurt themselves and each other. Because like I've been working on social products, for example. But then like why would they hire me if I'm giving that away for free? So I've been trying to figure out how to communicate the fact that there's risk and the fact that maybe not tomorrow, but maybe a year from now, no one's going to be using their thing if they don't address this. Because here's how this risk ties to their ability to make money. And I think that if people who do get the importance of this got into dynamics where they're paying each other rather than picking up from these kind of norms, that would be really amazing. Like I have this one prospect where she gets the value of all that, but she's also living in the system and feeling all this pressure and like you know sometimes we know that we're missing parts of the straw, but we feel like we have no choice but to push forward. And I'm trying to like get a word in and be like, yeah, I can help with this. Like, give me $500. But then I have to like write up what, value would come out of that. And then the conversation about the last thing we discussed kind of ended, and I'm like, okay, I'm seeing that there's this other issue that's blocking you. Maybe I can help with that. And now I got to write up how that would work. So it's like, if we can normalize even piecemeal, like, okay, come to a session and for an hour and pick Jane's brain without Jane having to spend 2 hours before that convincing you that it's worth it.
Right.
And maybe content, I do see like content helping with that, but still there are all these norms, because for people who need to understand people's ability to walk these global configurational tightropes, like CSM Jang, whatever her name is, like in the first video, she was talking about that, where basically people are trying to gain a sense of like something that makes them feel safe. Basically, that this other person's not going to get lost in this global configurational maze, and they can trust them to go navigate this part alone and come back. And for that, yeah, you need to talk for a good 5 hours with a bunch of gotcha questions to like make sure you can trust them, but then they're gonna mess up anyway when something happens the next week. Which, like, if you put a more context, like, I don't know what word to use besides context, because context is both, but like a interrelatedness type person through that ringer, you're gonna extract a lot of value from them in that process, because like that's how we communicate, is information, rather than this signaling of, yeah, I got this maze. And so like that kind of vetting just doesn't work for us.
Yeah, I like the aspect of talking about it as like a maze. Like they're testing people's ability to do a very sophisticated and advanced kind of global configurational symbolic communication. There's not maybe we need a cleaner name for it, but exactly what you're saying is like they're in this sort of like relational metaphor, and they're seeing like how much of this relation metaphor can you do, similar to somebody using jargon to eliminate somebody who they don't think is adequately knowledgeable on a subject matter or inside of a niche. So they've got a niche that they're eliminating all the autistic people from. They're like, oh, well, you don't know how to do this, so therefore you know how to do nothing. I'm like, well, no. But also that's not a good way to find certain kinds of abilities anyway. Like if somebody does have discrete knowledge of a very specific thing and they didn't learn it in a traditional way, so that potentially they're the out of the box thinkers that everyone keeps saying they want to hear from, who don't have a priority on like discussing the maze, discussing the jargon. Like they've got enough to communicate, and I feel like autistic people are going to be more towards that personality or that behavior, I'll say, than a typical person. But especially right now, because we get thrown out of the environments that keep doing these more elaborate tests. And I don't know why the tests are so elaborate. I think maybe it's an attempt to solve the mess that we're in, but it's clearly making it worse.
I got a thought on why it's elaborate. It's because competition, globalization, people aren't competing just with their neighbors anymore. And so it's like dating apps where everyone's an option, and suddenly everyone only wants to, not everyone, but lots of people are like, I want to hold out for a millionaire. It's that. And like I saw stats that like 80% of job descriptions or something are like, they're probably not going to hire anyone, but they will if like the perfect unicorn comes by. And that's wasting everyone's time, and like people are getting evicted because of this. And yeah.
Don't have time to waste.
Yeah, I'm trying to be optimistic that this is unsustainable, and at some point we'll have legislation about interview processes.
Sounds very reasonable.
Hey Jane, just thought I would mention that I'm making some food, so I'm gonna be popping in and out. So, yeah.
All right.
Hope you don't mind.
Oh no, you're totally fine. Please, this time is meant to be helpful. So please utilize it in ways that are helpful.
It's also helpful to talk to you because I think you're cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Likewise.
I miss chatting with you.
Yeah, it's likewise.
Mind if I ask an off-topic question?
Sure.
How is the skill check gang doing? I know you're not a this year, but
yeah, we're on kind of a hiatus just because of people's schedules and life is a little crazy. So we're going to reconvene in late summer and try to come up with a game plan for the year ahead. I might take on more of a role of organizing. We'll see. But yeah, we just had to take a hiatus because everyone's life was crazy.
If there's anything I can do to help as well.
Yeah, thank you.
We offer those
Thank you. I'll keep you posted on what I hear from everyone. Yeah, I'm expecting we'll start trying to figure it out in July, end of July. We're supposed to come up with a whole new way of doing it so that we can not get sidetracked as much as we ended up getting sidetracked. Not that life shouldn't sidetrack you, but quote unquote sidetracked. Ha ha ha. But yeah, best way to say it is people had to build other things so much so that it just interrupted our ability to get to work on it.
Hey, it happens, and
yeah,
you're making progress yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Congrats on the wedding, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, it's nice. I was gonna say, Lilith mentioned not getting needs met, and that's the actual problem is our needs aren't good. We have needs, and being married to somebody who's in the category of best friend is great, but also it helps me know it's I was very lonely. I didn't even know what it felt like to not have that loneliness. And this isn't saying I live with my parents, whatever, but even still there's a difference there. You can't.
Be right back.
What's that?
I have to check on the food. I'll be right back.
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead. Anyways, but I didn't know where my needs for interpersonal time with a person I can actually spend that time pretty successfully with, and not seamlessly. I still have stuff that's definitely aspects of my autism that I need to work through. However, I did not have an environment where that could work very well. It got better when I got a dog. It got better when I started this effort on streaming, and I made the Discord and made friends that are specifically able to do these conversations. So it's better, but also just even I had a client at my work mention oh, it must be an adjustment being around somebody all the time and and as if I would miss my solitude or something. I was dude, I was so lonely. You have no idea. I couldn't take it anymore. And I didn't know I even had a problem with that, because how would I know? How am I supposed to compare what I'm experiencing to people who have no autism and have all of these ways to establish the right amount of connection with other human beings? And there's no way for me to sit down. I've thought about it, by the way, sit down and be how many hours do you need with other people? I have thought of that, right? And just even to see if there is a ballpark that my brain and all brains want us to be at, regardless of most disabilities, including autism, and we just aren't hitting it. And we've just had emergency lights on our whole fucking life, our whole lives about nope. So it's weird. It's being able to talk about that is very challenging because I'm also shy about a person with an holistic person, even an holistic therapist, translating that into something that's like incorrect or maladaptive. You know what I'm saying? So it's like goddamn, and that feels like just a very real concern, but also I feel I could smack that shit down, but they have the authority because they went through the race and they got the stupid trophy and I didn't do that. It's like, oh my god.
That is annoying.
I feel that's so hard. Yeah, like the fact that my ability to get help is like gatekept based on storytelling, and that's like so painful. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? Lots of people from past generations have died without healing and just been marginally rough around the edges. Maybe that's going to be me too. Like will try out a new therapist every couple weeks, and then I'm dysregulating enough that I need to take a couple weeks off. But anyway, I mean, this is more for like processing like deeper stuff though. Like I'm pretty okay like with day-to-day stuff. But yeah, the original thing I was gonna say was about like what you were saying about hours of social time. There has been a lot of research done on this, and I've explored this space a lot. There's that book Bowling Alone about loneliness, which I haven't read cover to cover, but like it keeps coming up in these conversations. And I think there's a deeper layer of like what specifically is happening in those connections. Like you were saying, you live with your parents, but it's still not the same kind of thing. And like, so what are these ingredients we need? And there are lots of people out there seeing one slice of the pie and claiming that's a whole thing and building an app or an academic career around that. And then so I'm like piecing it together, but also yeah, it's like digging for a needle in a haystack to the point where figuring out what works just based on my experience might honestly be faster, and just taking in these little bits of information from that world as I come across them like casually. And another thing that I've been thinking about is what actually needs to be in person versus what can be virtual, because for a lot of people it's just easier for them to meet certain needs in person, or like it's easy enough that they don't bother seeing what is possible virtually. But as someone who's getting priced out of places and having a hard time finding accessible environments, the more needs I can meet virtually, like if I can, reduce what I need to do in person to like 2%, that's so liberating. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
I feel that, like, when I was in college, I went to my classes, but aside from that and the dining hall, I would spend most of my time in my room since I have a single. So aside from like going to events that interested me, I didn't really do much other socializing or like getting through projects that required partners.
Yeah,
So it took me a bit to make friends, but I did make friends.
I think
So
also there's like different ways of being around other people, and I sometimes have had like a couple of things where somebody's like, "Oh, just come over to do like a writing session or something." Like, please don't make me drive there. Like please don't do this, or don't drive here and then never leave. Like I need this to end at some point, and I can't take all this extra stuff on top of it because I need to be building like my life depends on it, because it absolutely does. If I had more structural support for me building the things that I need to build, then maybe I could have this feeling of being okay with the extra bells and whistles that come with trying to meet someone in person. I think that's a problem. I think that like there is so much pressure on me to build all of my solutions. And they don't exist. They are not there. I also possibly need to build a solution where I can talk to people in a government in some fashion, some way, somewhere, maybe not directly, so that they make actual accommodations that are real material accommodations for autistic people, so we don't have to build everything. That's like insane. I basically have to build a pseudo reality that supports my needs, and then it needs to support my needs well enough for me to be able to compete with people whose needs are already met, because they don't have to build things, they have to arrive places. And I'm supposed to, at the end of this, be okay with it, and then be okay when somebody says, can you take another 2 hours out of your life that are just for you sitting in a fucking car? And I'm like, all right, cool, I'll listen to some podcasts. Well, not podcasts, I don't listen to that. I'll honestly, I listen to like lectures. I'll listen to some lectures. I'll have Speechify read out papers or some other shit like that while I'm on the way, so I don't waste any time, because I have to build. And that can read as perfectionism, which is the most infuriating thing, because it's like, no,
Yeah,
that's
I was about to say.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
it's like, go ahead.
You shouldn't be putting so much pressure on yourself. I just saying this from a mental health perspective. I don't want you to like.
I completely agree. However, and this is why Kyle's dope, is like he can see I am actually up against that shit. I'm not imagining it. It's really there. And I need to fix. Yeah, I need to fix this shit, because this can happen to anyone with autism. Anybody with autism can fall into a situation where they don't have enough support rapidly and be stuck there, or they're born there, or you see what I'm saying? So it's like, we need structural support. We don't have structural support. Me even inventing the structural support, part of the motivation is to then give it to other people with autism, so they don't have that much pressure on them. But like, the reason I have the pressure on myself is I know I'm intelligent enough to do it, and it ain't happened yet, right? So like, it doesn't mean like, oh, I'm the chosen one. It's not here. I'm smart enough to work on it. I have to work on it because I'm still pro-social. And also, I don't enjoy this. Like, me as a person experiencing it, this sucks. I want it to suck less. And I didn't know how to express that until recently. Well, yeah, but you shouldn't have to. I agree with that, but like, I appreciate that. But like, you shouldn't have to do that either. Like, we as autistic people shouldn't have to rely on one another when you might have limited resources as well. And so it's so when the rest of the world that doesn't have autism, broadly speaking, with exceptions, because the rest of the world is extremely cruel to everybody, but broadly speaking, it is possible for them to use existing structures that have catered to the majority to not have this level of problems, to not have this degree of constant, I don't want to say failure, but like inability to get done what your brain needs to get done. They can get arriving goals. I cannot get my building goals, and I need the building goals. The building, I need success at building. They have success at reaching goals. I need success at building, or else. Okay, all right, I'm done.
Oh, Jane, I think that's really noble what you're doing for the community, and like, I really appreciate all the thought that you're I'm glad all the thought that you're putting into all of this. And I just hope that you're not like, I'm not saying that you're doing this, you know, this might be a lot of projecting too, but I just know that a lot of times like that thing you said kind of reminded me of something that I used to feel of, like, if I'm not going to do something, who is? And then sometimes I would put pressure on myself to do more than I have bandwidth for, or to put myself in situations where others are relying on me for things that I can't do. Or, you know, and just like, also like, people getting dependent on coming to me, and then one day I don't have bandwidth, and whoops. So yeah, like, I just hope you're not like putting pressure on yourself to do more than you can at any time.
Thank you. The way that I've translated it is to say, like, I need to build things that work. I am like, my subject that I'm able to experiment on, right? So if I get any of this to work, then I can just be like, here's the thing, not the me. Here's the thing, do the thing, use this thing. Because look, I'm able to build more things and exist in a quasi reality where there is structural support for people who build instead of structural support for people who arrive. And does that make sense? So that's my main issue. I shouldn't maybe think that like I'm the only way to create experiments with which to test, and I probably do a bit too much of that, but even still, it's like that's the problem, is like there's no place for me to go, like, and now I go to the place where we all decide on what we're going to build today. And now I tried to make that in my Discord to an extent, but it's still hard because I still have to interact with the world around me that doesn't support that way of doing things, like in a very like literal sense, like a very material, grounded sense, not even in a like, we believe in you, like, cool. That's not a thing that creates anything I need. Thank you, people who believe in me. Great. So then yeah. So anyways, okay. And Lilith, please go.
Just, Jane, you were talking about like how you're doing all these things all the time, right? And like I spend my life managing my activities of daily living, right? Especially preparing food, thinking about what food to prepare, eating that food, making sure it fits within the food budget I have, right? Doing the admin work of having 1 or 2 appointments a week and just managing my body budget of just like trying to keep myself out of depression and in good moods by doing things I enjoy, right? And I struggle to meet these basic needs because the only like structural support I have is a certain amount of money each month, right? Which is supposed to be able to support me as somebody who the government says, yes, you're disabled and cannot work, here's money. But the prices of things are such that and with my disability, it's a full-time job to figure out how to use that money to get food and get to appointments, right? Like, and do the basic things of life that it takes up my whole life. And when I did go to the therapist, there was this expectation that they could just give me tools to deal with anxiety and depression, and then I'd be able to get a job because the solution has to include me getting a job, finding some way to make more money, because the solution will never be me as somebody who the government acknowledges can't work and make their own money, getting enough money to live on. That's just not an option, apparently.
The system that we have, it's not based on need, right? It's based on, can you arrive here? And it's like, oh, okay, I have an arriving disability. And they're like, oh, okay, you're fucked.
I forgot a contextual point with like Blink Wait brought up, like, don't put so much stress on yourself. But like, this is stress that is required to maintain my existence, right? Like, I need to put the pressure on myself to accomplish these basic things about living my life. Otherwise, I will fail at maintaining my life, and I will have to go live with my parents, and I will not be able to have the physical things and space and everything that allows me to manage my emotions and mood and everything as successfully as I can now, right? If I fail at balancing these circumstances, I will simply go to worse ones. And if my parents weren't around for me to live with in an emergency, I would just be homeless and eventually die.
Yes, and have a good time at the event Enigma. So what people are saying to us is like, someone of your intellect, the status quo if you just don't try so hard, will be fine. And we're saying someone with our disability, the status quo, if we don't do all this shit constantly, will be very not fine. And then they'll be like, you're catastrophizing, you're exaggerating. I'm like, nope, now you're insulting my intellect. Make it make sense.
Right.
Am I intellectually gifted or not?
Smart. Why don't you create your own job? And like, I don't understand how to interact with the mechanisms of a job in a way that doesn't completely destroy my energy reserves.
Right. And everyone confidently
like,
will
just not functional.
Everyone, those same people
will just say, no, it's fine, you'll figure it out. But my brain doesn't work that way. I have a disability.
Yes,
right?
And
the things about getting a job are so stressful to me that I can't even attempt to get a job, right? This isn't like, oh, let's give you some anxiety tools so that you can do this, because my body budget needs to be balanced so that I can keep this output level of functionality. So if I try to change the way I'm doing things to burn more energy to figure out how to get a job, I am going to sink into depression, right? And I know this, it's happened before. And they're saying, no, just do it, and then all of a sudden you'll have a job. But like, no, I'll lose the job immediately.
No, and they're like, just invent a job. I'm like, okay, what is the process of inventing a job? Yeah. Well, first you have to go through all of these forms that make us say your job is okay. I'm like, oh, you don't say. So the admin thing is what I must do to have a job that you'll recognize as worthwhile. Meanwhile, you'll all confidently acknowledge that most jobs suck and are stupid. So what do you think that system produces?
Well, in like doing commission work is all about actually relationships. You have to build relationships with people that have extra income to spend on paying for things to be commissioned, right? So, I've attempted to make doing art my job, right? Like there are things that I could do that people would pay for, but there's no way for me to actually get to the point where they're saying, okay, do this.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah. Because they're still, it's like, I just don't understand. There's still like all these doing as arriving, like check marks that you need to get, or like you get like a green light if you get green lit basically if you meet that. And I was like, okay, so I'm disabled at doing that. So then how do I get green lit to do this thing that people, sure, they absolutely do value. I don't think they don't. But if you actually look at the requirements that those same people have said are normal and fine and reasonable to be able to do that thing, I am not going to be able to do that, like, because of the disability, unless if you make some crazy accommodation for me to get the green lights, to get the go ahead. So I don't know how to fix that. I would love some ideas on how to fix that. But that demands something of my society at large. They have to say they either don't care about me not having met those green lights and somehow vouch for me in some other way. I need like some sort of like license, or you know what I mean? Like I need some sort of a like, here's a thing that says we signed off on this, because that's what you require in this current society. Is you need the paperwork. You need to be official. So how do I get recognized when the processes to be recognized are what I'm disabled at participating in at all? Like, and that's just so hard to get people to believe that is the problem, which I'm really annoyed by. It's like, oh no, you should just white knuckle it. You should just go through the system and it'll be just fine at the end. I'm like, okay, well, how many things is that actually true about? Everything? I don't think it's everything. Maybe there's a few things, but what if that's not what I want to do? So now I have like 5 jobs I actually get to do, because those are the ones that an autistic person can white knuckle to the end. This is less solution oriented and more complaining. But well, okay, so yeah, I want to describe the shape of what I am experiencing and what I think people with autism are set up to experience, though we don't all have the same experience of this. And I do hope that people are able to get involved in money-making endeavors that just make this a non-issue. Like, I would rather this just not be a problem. But I've never, and even to this day, I don't know how to earn enough money. I just don't. And because I can't regulate myself with doing as arriving, I can't even see it. So then everyone's like, oh, you should be absolutely fine because look, we can do it. I'm like, that's amazing. You, person without a disability, can do a competition that I'm disabled at. Like, what? I can't find like a role model there, or I can't find inspiration there. It's weird. I can't even see how that's possible. Anyway, so I mean, now I'm kind of rambling, but like,
well,
yeah.
So in Hollywood, people have managers, and what the manager means in this context is it is somebody who gets you work, somebody who knows you and what you can do and what you want to do, and they find jobs for you to do, and then you do those jobs. And like, why can't I just have a person like that, please? Like,
Right.
why can't I go have an interview with a job placement person where they will interview me about who I am and then find jobs that actually suit me and send my resumes there. And then I could go to appointments with those people. Why do I have to do that task myself?
Right.
Why can't I pay someone to be the middleman there? There doesn't seem to be anyone doing that job like that.
Yes.
And it's extremely frustrating.
And I think, like, you know, if there's like an unemployment office or something like that, it's remedial, I'm assuming, and a very archaic system that I never hear people using.
It's like school, right? It's like that they teach you how to do it because you don't know how to do it. But it's not that I don't know how to do it. It's that I'm not able to do it.
Right.
So I've been to like unemployment agencies where they just say, this is how you make a resume. These are sites you can go to find places to send your resume. But sending my resume to places takes me a long time to fill out the forms and make sure it's all right and send it out.
Yeah.
And there's also like a predictive emotional load to doing this, right? And the process is that you're not going to get very many callbacks in general with being me, right? Like I don't have any of the arrival trophies.
Yes.
And so it's like, okay, so I need to go through this process that like takes me an hour to 5 hours per job, like 1 hour if I'm able to focus and I'm in a good mood and everything, right?
Right. Yep.
5 hours if I need to psych myself up for 4 hours first.
Yes.
Before actually filling it out.
Right.
And I need to do this hundreds of times to have a chance at getting an interview for a job. And I do know, like, I'm not going to like any of the jobs that I actually get, right? Like, the jobs themselves are going to stress me out and reduce my ability to, like, be as happy as I am day to day now. But if I could just get one right now, I would, because the trade-off's worth it. But the trade-off of spending hundreds of hours to get that thing, it's just, I can't make myself act as though it's worthwhile.
Yeah.
I'd rather spend all that energy scraping by than spend all that energy getting a shitty job that will make it so I don't have to scrape by quite so hard.
Right. Yeah. And like, how happy do we have to be? Like that's sort of what I'm hitting personally, is that like I felt really, really bad because of some barriers to having connections with other human beings, fellow human beings. That is a lot better, like way better. And now I'm like, oh, maybe I'm actually relatively fine. I don't, maybe, like, not to go too far, but I think that might be close enough to an antidepressant that I don't need to do that. So that's great. So so then that's where I'm at. It's like, okay, I have been told that I don't feel good enough. I have been told this by, like, we just want to make sure that you feel good enough so that you can do the work that you have to do. Okay, fair, whatever. But how good do other people have to feel to get work done? Because I don't think it's as good as you're telling me I need to feel. Like I don't drink, I don't use drugs. Like I do all these healthy habits. I'm moving around, yada 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 yada. If that's where I'm at, that's not normal either. So why do I have to have like sparkles and sunshine up my butt as the only solution to like having enough energy to deal with something that is a disability? That's making my disability not a material reality. It's making it like a vibe.
Yeah. Well, so this reminds me, like, I picked up a resume at a produce store that I was shopping at the other day because on that day, my mood was drastically higher. Like, my energy levels were high. I was viewing the world from a completely different lens of what my capabilities are. So I was like, oh, the me of this moment could walk here every day and work here, and that would work. But now I'm home and I have the application. I'm like, no, I can't be that version of me every day. That's not how it works. I get a couple of those a month.
Right.
And the normal version of me, I would struggle to even get myself to get up and go to that job.
Yeah.
And then if I did it, I the me that exists afterwards would be completely drained, right? Like I'd be burnt
Yeah.
out. Right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I guess I just rather be in the position where my life will fall apart if inflation hits hard enough than the one where like I preemptively destroy my life by burning myself out on a shitty job.
Mm-hmm.
They're not good choices that I'm being offered.
Right. And it's all right. Let me try to get this to a sunnier place. Okay, so given I really think that is our situation. I think that's accurate. Yeah. I don't think it's distorted. Now, we need to then divorce ourselves on some level from the world around us and its rules and expectations, and make a version of what works for us that if you superimpose it on top of the world as it is, it works, even though it's not for the reasons people keep insisting things will work out. Like, we basically have to say, like, I don't care what story people have to tell themselves as to why it's okay for me to be doing this weird thing. If they see that, I'm getting things done, whatever, and then I want to never think about them. I just want to think about this alternative world that I've made for me to occupy and possibly will translate hopefully to other people like me, so that we live in this alternate reality with the ambition that one day we get to live in a different model of society. Like, that makes sense when you understand this as a disability. You just would not put a disabled person in an environment that completely expects them not to have the disability, like, at all times. That's crazy. That doesn't make sense. And that's what we have. So I need to have all other environments. My home has to act very differently. And then when I am stuck interacting with people, I need to not have it projected onto me or insisted that I start using their model, that I start using their story, their narrative, their explanation of why their shit runs the way it does. I, first of all, disagree. But second of all, I can't use it anyway. So I don't care how much someone explains to, like, for example, a congenitally blind person, like, why they organized their home the way they did for visual purposes instead of practical purposes, moving around. So if the person with the impairment can't move around your gorgeous design, it doesn't matter if you keep telling them they should appreciate the design and you're not going to move anything. to contemplate neurotypical or allistic norms anymore. Like, I don't want to have to do that. I just want to live in my norms. I want to get to that point, because on some level I think that's why we can feel resentful. Is like, gee, that looks nice. Like, just getting to exist inside of a norm, even if you have grievances with it, it's nowhere near the level of the grievances of the person that is in an environment that is just supposed to be appreciated by them, even though they're disabled in such a way that not only can they not appreciate it, but the needs that they actually have are not being addressed, and that they can't use the solution that the person without the disability uses to deal with the problem area in the environment. So we can't, that's like literally what it is. So I don't know. So it's like, I would just want to spend more time in my own world. And autism, it's like, oh, you shouldn't be in your own world. And what I was like, well, I'm not literally in my own world. I cannot have the logic of this person who has an ability I don't have occupy my brain as like how I'm supposed to see life. I can't. With that too is then, like, holistic people can't anticipate or understand when their environments are going to be like, we're not going to respond normally to the environment, and we're going to end up making something weird happen. Even if it's something weird and harmful to us, I cannot see the environment. So, it's like, oh, why did you do that? I was working with the only information I can see. You can see the other information, so of course you have no idea that I'm going to have this problem. It's like when somebody can see stuff that I can't see, and they're like, well, why'd you do that? I'm like, I mean, it won't make sense to you why I did that, because, the person with the ability that we don't have has their entire reality, like, constructed around that ability being present. So there's no way for them to escape it. Like, they can't live in our world. And, like, why can't we live in a world that, like, belongs to us and belongs to how our brains think? Why isn't the world big enough, and, like, isn't society supple enough to accommodate that? It's gotta be. And that's where I think I end up, is like, does it have that changeability? Like, can it be transformed in that way? I hope so, but I it's very frustrating because it's so far away. Does that all make sense?
It does. And if I could add some 2 cents in here, like, the world is supple enough for that, but the people in charge are just too damn rigid to make any changes.
Right.
Like, we're just not. It's an election year, people. Vote and all that. But, like, go out, do the things. I had something and then I lost it. I realized, like, I had something and then I lost it.
Have something and you can type. We have the little chat open just for the Discord itself.
Yeah.
Like, so that you can always, like, throw something in there as a mental note, even if it's just for you.
Okay. Thanks. Good to know.
Yeah, see if that helps. It might. Sometimes we do that.
I will. Just wanted to, for my 2 cents in there, though.
Yeah, no,
And give you my sympathy.
I agree with that. That is that. It's like, the leadership is rigid, and I think the leadership is partly rigid because they're like, oh, but I got all these green lights and then I got a trophy, so now I have absolute authority because, look, I have all the things, so I always have absolute authority forever. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's not a good leader. That's not what you want in a leader. And yet, like, our system is biased towards doing that.
Exactly. It's the same sort of problem we have with other political problems in the world. Just,
yeah.
It's
really the same thing. Like, and it's like, on some level, I think autistic people are kind of like a canary in a coal mine, where we're experiencing some of this with greater intensity, but it's a problem that is clearly impacting the vast majority of people negatively. A couple of people are exploiting it, and then most people, even if they think they're getting something good out of it, are ultimately ending up with worse results. Like they're in worse conditions than we have to be. And I'm not like a utopianist or something like that, where I think we're going to be, in some heaven on earth situation. No, we aren't able to respond to the problems we actually have, because the people in charge have to believe that they should be in charge. I'm like, oh, well, you don't know how to solve these problems. They're like, well, they're not really problems then. That's where we're at.
Mm-hmm. Maybe someday if we get like someone who can represent us better in office,
yeah,
that would be a start. But
yeah,
the candidates this time around are not gonna represent us, and
no,
honestly,
yeah, it's discouraging to say the very least. And it's like that aspect is alarming, I guess. Like, well, but it's important to touch on, because it's all kind of like the same problem. I mean, it's we're experiencing the consequences of that problem. It's not like the problem was like, we're gonna aim for the autistic people. No, that's not what's happening. We're not specifically being like singled out here, but we are, by virtue of having autism, experiencing a pretty difficult situation that is specifically caused by the forms of leadership that this system leaves us stuck with, like leaves everybody stuck with. This is not ideal for anybody, and for autistic people it's like what are we supposed to do here? Like, play along with this, just kind of do the best we can and become TikTok famous? What the hell is that?
I mean, for what I'm aiming to be, like, I want to be a writer in Hollywood. Hopefully,
yeah,
that'll work out, but I also don't really have a plan
right
at all.
Right.
For, like, I got a summer job. That's good. I'm going to Tribeca this summer. That's good. But, like, beyond that, like, I have my next classes lined up. But, like, the plan. Beyond that, what is the plan? How am I going to actually be good at this?
Yes. Right. Exactly. And there's not a clear way for you to do that, because autistic people approach our skills differently. We don't approach our skills as, I'm going to clear this finish line and run a race with other people. It's going to be, I'm going to surround myself with this information, and I'm going to try to understand it as best as I possibly can, upside down, backwards, inside out, right? And then I'll give you something that's really high quality. But that requires a huge investment, because we've made it so expensive to learn.
Yep. And I'm lucky that my family is able to actually pay for my education.
Right.
Not, like, I'm lucky to have that and the ability to get jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, other people aren't as lucky.
Yeah. And you shouldn't have to rely on luck. And I guess that's where I get frustrated. And I really appreciate just your sorry, my thing drops off a little bit. Okay, I appreciate your compassion too, for just like the emotional toll, or I guess like the stress toll this takes. But also, I don't want any of us to think that that's okay or normal, that we keep having to default to that. Like, that shouldn't be our status quo. That's sort of what I was getting originally, is like, our status quo needs to be a lot better than it is. And that's the basic, like, argument or pitch I would give to anybody who's not autistic, or even somebody who's feeling down on themselves. Our status quo needs to be better. How do you make the status quo better? That comes from the outside. We can't do it all by ourselves, or even as little clumps. Like, we have to have something that interfaces successfully with the outside world. And I would argue the outside world has to make some real accommodations and changes. And like you were saying, the outside world is already doing things that not only harm us, but aren't good for anybody. And we're getting impacted by those things specifically. And it's all these issues with kind of like sociopathic leaders. And,
Mm-hmm.
like that's, we're not interested in it
And a
because it's a
lot of this
special.
as well is
Hmm.
more than just the US.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
This is a problem that wants the other bigger problems, because like there's, like if you're following the news, you know about what's going on in Gaza
Yes.
and all that. But like this needs to be dealt with. But there are also everything else in the world needs to be dealt with. There's a million things. You know what I mean?
There are, and the things that are, they're kind of like ripples in a lake where they're just all intersecting with each other. The lake is the problem, for one. Like, it's just a shitty lake. And then it's like, here's all these problems that are on the surface of it. I'm like, the entire lake is poisoned. like this is not working for us to be like, well, we'll just wait till those ripples go away, then we'll try to fix the poison in the lake. That's what it feels like. Oh man, that's a good metaphor, right? It's like, oh, there's more ripples over there. Okay, well, we'll just wait till the lake becomes absolutely calm, and then we'll fix the fact that the entire lake is poison.
If you don't mind my asking, how do you like compartmentalize, or at least deal with everything in the world that is just poison? How do you manage to survive all that?
So I've been thinking about that a lot recently, and this is a big problem right now, and I really like that you asked that question. So I was talking about this resin-filled straw metaphor of like seeing. Did you get to hear that part?
I didn't, but I can understand the metaphor.
Okay, so reality is a resin-filled straw. Everything embedded in the straw, in this resin, is events that have happened. People also stand alongside the straw in different points in history and project something on with a little hologram beam. And if we can look top down through the resin, so you go to the top of the straw and look all the way down, you can see the patterns over time. So for me, I try to take the most like bird's eye view, top down through that straw view of history, of like time up until this point, and say like, what are some broader themes about humans, so I don't go crazy. I'm like, oh, humans don't realize what we're doing wrong until it's too late. Why don't we do that? Oh, we don't do this top down thing. Okay, so if I insist on doing the top down as best I can, and try not to look too much at like, oh, you should look at this information, you should look at this information. I'm like, oh, funny thing, this person announcing that I should look at this information is also a phenomenon embedded in the resin. So I could look over and be like, what is the phenomenon of people saying that? And then you can kind of get a little bit of distance from the whole situation of like, oh, we just don't know what we're doing. Like, humans are really bad at solving the kinds of problems that we have like exponentially increased. So that's what I do to deal with it, is just acknowledge like humans are terrible at solving or talking about or dealing with the kinds of problems that we have set up the conditions to make more and more and more and more of. And that is a good thing to know. Like it's like, in so much as I can accept, and I think this is modeled by my autism, and this is very new, so I share this also looking for feedback about how this might land with you, because I've been working on this recently. I've learned to accept my disabilities in my autism, because it's very important to do that. I shouldn't hold myself to some imaginary version of myself that it doesn't have the disabilities I do. That's ridiculous. There's so much I can do that doesn't make me confront my disability unnecessarily. There's so much I can do that relies on the things that I developed instead because I have a disability, so things that are strengths. So because I know how to do that better now that I have a diagnosis and have time to work on it, that was really helpful. Now I can say, okay, why would I be mad at myself or anyone else for humans being very disabled collectively, literally all of us, at solving the kinds of problems that we have made a machine basically that generates and spits out these kinds of problems. These are not problems that any of us can fix. Not the smartest of us, not the most powerful of us, not the ones that brag the most, not the most visible, not the most invisible, not the quiet ones. None of us are good at solving these sorts of problems. This is outside of our abilities as humans. And then I can look at the whole thing and be like, man, we really need to accept our goddamn limits. and not create machines that make us super impaired, super unable to manage aspects of our lives that we could manage in a different environment that doesn't just knock us into disability. So I see humanity as creating a situation where humanity is disabled. We can't we aren't literally disabling ourselves, but we are disabled at solving these sorts of problems because we never had the ability in the first place. And that helps me to it can seem dismissive to some people, I'm sure, but it helps me to realize, like, even if somebody dismisses me, that's denial. That's denial. Like, it's okay. Sometimes the universe, reality is just going to say, no, humans, you are not able to do that. And that's what we're pushing back against. We're like, no, we're little godlets. Of course we could do this. No, we can't. None of us. Zero of us. Also,
Hey.
I got a sub from an old friend who helped me get my autism diagnosis by noticing it a long time ago. Great to see you again, too.
Congratulations.
Yeah, that's nice, right?
And, thanks for the sub,
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, that's Andrew. Andrew's cool.
Thanks for the sub, Andrew.
Okay. Yeah, so I appreciate, like, the space to process that, because it's like you're is that helpful? And actually let me pause. How does that land with you? What are some thoughts that came up?
Well, it lands pretty well. Like, we're all struggling and looking through that resin. It's like, I get it, basically. You have more experience than me in all this, but I get the same feeling.
Yeah, and like for you, right? Like, we all kind of have our own. There's like a cosmic resin-filled straw that's like objective-ish reality, if we could ever really know it, and we ourselves have our own resin-filled straw, right? So I've had more time to look down the straw when I allow myself to do that, against social pressure not to, by the way. But when I look down the straw, I have more patterns to evaluate, right? Like, I've gotten more information. And I think for autistic people, we should get the space to acknowledge that we have been tipping the straw to look down it a lot. And that's not us failing in society or failing to notice, oh, you should be running this race right now. I don't care. I don't think we should be. I don't think that's healthy for the people running the race. And no, if the people running the race don't flip and go into this other model, which is way more abstract, and it's difficult to visualize. It's way easier to visualize run to a finish line. That's something we can physically do with our bodies. Putting the universe in a cosmic resin-filled straw, that's not something you're ever gonna do, So I have to use
unless you're someone who, like, professionally does that kind of stuff. Like, I have a friend who's a history major.
Yeah.
And he just spends a lot of time looking at all the parts of history. It's like, he has that ability naturally to know, basically.
Yeah, and it's not even it's not even a perfect metaphor, because if somebody was congenitally blind, you couldn't use the resin-filled straw metaphor. You probably would have to use something else. But even still, yeah, go ahead.
Maybe, like, I don't know. Is there a way? I don't know a good metaphor exactly, but something like a book.
Well,
like a book where anyone can read it, no matter their disability. Like, the book has Braille for the blind.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you could probably do a Braille metaphor, because they could feel the. Yeah, I think that might work. Yeah.
Like, if you're deaf, then like, you could just read the book. Like, the book is like, it's the most magic book in the world, because everyone has access to it and can look at it, and it's the biggest book with all of the history and all that. I don't know, like.
Well, it's like.
Is a book a good metaphor?
It's tricky. It's tricky because it's still linear, or it's too locked into being linear. We need to be able to shift from linearity to seeing like a completed shape. So what I would think one way to do that, so you could use a tactile version of the resin-filled straw, where it's like, Thanks
What?
for gifting a
This
sub.
neighborhood.
Andrew's gifted a
What?
sub. Thanks for gifting a
To
sub,
who?
Andrew. To wait 6 months to be Philippe. That's funny. somebody's name got goofed up. It could be Phil from back in the day. It might actually be. Okay. So all right.
Thanks for the gifted sub.
Yeah, thank you. So one way to think about this is like, let's say you had a tactile version of this, so you would still move objects through space, and it would be like a little tube that it's embedded in something that you can pass through and touch. So like maybe just floating in air. So you would have like, instead of a resin-filled tube, you'd have to fill it with air and be able to touch the objects. But then if you flip top down, you'd want to be able to compress everything and then feel the overall shape that makes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it would be something more akin to that. And that still, I think, would work. And that works for me. So this idea of like, when we look down something, it compresses the image. And that's what it is. It's like it compresses this long expanse of time into one thing. Instead of looking at it lengthwise, if we look at it directly down. So if you were able to do it in a tactile way, then the shape that you would feel with your hands once it's compressed would have all of this information and the relationships between the information. It would be a little different. You might want to think about taking slices of it and compressing them, and taking larger slices and compressing them. But compression of physical objects that you can touch and then feeling how they compress into new shapes could kind of work. But I had to do a lot of work. Oh, and by the way, Andrew, this is a friend that I met through Skill Check, and they are autistic and were really good at freestyling and came on to freestyle at one of our events for Skill Check that was at a conference like years back. And so they've stuck around, and their name, they go by Blinkwave, and they also do stream when their school schedule permits.
I will be streaming at 3 p.m. today, actually, if folks
awesome.
want to tune in.
Yeah, Blinkwave. I'll link their info. Shout out. How do I do that?
I wouldn't.
I have to remember how to do this. There is a shout out thing.
Speaking of rapping, I've been writing some new lyrics down.
Oh, good.
So, if you want to see them, let me know.
Yeah,
I can send them your way.
That'd be great.
Hoping maybe we could get in the studio again this summer if my job permits.
Yes, that would be awesome. I should be good schedule-wise with that too. Okay, 1 second. Let me figure this out.
I'll send the lyrics your way.
Okay, awesome. Wait. Blinkwave, what is your channel name again?
It's, I think it's Blinkwave 21.
21. Okay, got it. Let me just shout that out. Yes. Perfect.
Yeah.
I have shouted you out. Okay. Yeah, okay. So then, where was I?
This is the one I'll send.
What was I saying? Where was I?
Sending you that now. You can check it when you have time, no pressure.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let's see. Where was I? I had a thing I was saying and then I lost it. I was talking about... Andrew, do you remember in chat, Andrew, do you remember what I was talking about a second ago? Before I was like, I need to shout out. What the heck was I saying? Do you remember, Blink?
I don't recall exactly.
Yeah, I was like, in between stuff.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Let me... there's always the, I look back in my own VOD. Resin straws. Oh, yeah! Condensing. That's right. Condensing. Yes, condensing so you can see patterns over time, and you can see projected patterns over time, and all these things that people do. At any rate, my point with all that is that, I sat around and was like, how can I talk about this in a way that at least it works as a metaphor, at least if you can see, and now I have maybe a way to start doing this for people who can't. But, it's not unnatural to think this way. It's just harder because it's not as directly analogous to our bodies wiggly wobbling around in the room all day, which is what we do, or we just wobble around in space. And we use a lot of metaphors that like are easy to understand from that perspective. But that's not gonna cut it forever, and I want to like create this metaphor so people also understand how autistics are thinking. So it's like we have to have time to flip the straw and look down it. We have to, and once we do, if we see something that we're like in all honesty looks like a honest to God problem, there has to be a place for us to say that, or else it will drive you bonkers. It doesn't feel safe if you're like, nobody else is turning the straw because we can't think of this metaphor, and Jane had to think of it yesterday. So nobody's turning down the straw. These problems, as I look down the straw, are only getting worse. In fact, nobody's able to solve this kind of problem if you keep looking through the straw. There's no evidence we've ever solved the kind of problem that we have created like a perpetual motion machine that just generates this problem. And then you look at other people and you're like, I don't trust any of you. like that's the problem.
So basically, it's just a cycle of
Chicken Little, like or like or like the whole like emperor who has no clothes on thing. Or like the kid, it's like that emperor is 100% absolutely naked, and everyone's like, but you haven't gotten this award. You don't have the special award to get our special thing that says you're a special person that has a special opinion, so we'll listen to you now. It's like, okay, well, you're all awful. Have fun with your emperor.
And even when you do get that special award, it can be taken away from you for having the wrong opinion.
True. Yes. Yep.
Like,
yep. That's absolutely.
I can give an example if you want.
Go ahead.
So, a couple months ago, just as the whole Palestinian thing started going on, Melissa Barrera was calling it out and being like, there's a genocide going on, and she was fired from her role in the Scream franchise because the studio believed she was being anti-Semitic. It's not inherently anti-Semitic to call out the genocide going on in Gaza.
Right.
I don't think.
Right. No.
So, basically, her and Susan Sarandon, who also was calling out the genocide in the beginning, they both lost major lucrative deals, and now their careers are on a backslide.
Right. So yes, so you can be punished socially for saying things that don't follow with what you're supposed to be saying. And the supposed to be saying is not very clearly defined. It's kind of vague because I think it's built on this skill of being able to see what I call like global configurational information, right? So you're like, no, you're supposed to say this now. Yeah.
Calling out the genocide is bad, but now that people are actually seeing what is going on, more people are able to call it out and not suffer as much.
Right.
Not that the government is actually doing anything.
Well, and then I would be...
That's the thing of the people in charge.
Yeah, I would be an outlier. I think I've talked about this to a couple of people. I've had a couple of people that are on the younger edge, too, that have asked from, like, the Discord, like, hey, what is your opinion on what's happening, right? And what I end up saying is, like, I don't think humans should have guns. I don't think humans can handle having guns. I don't think humans can handle having bombs.
I agree with this,
I don't think,
honestly.
Right. So then people are like, oh, but you're living in a fantasy world. I'm like, oh, really? Like, do you want the horrors to ever end? Or do you like this? Do you like this? Like, I don't like this. I think that all militaries are recruitment and exploitation of teenage boys in a vulnerable state of their neurological development.
Especially when the people are forced to go into the military. There are still some countries where you're like required to serve.
Yeah.
Recently, Rishi Sunak, if you've heard of him, he's like a British guy of political importance. He's he's saying he might bring back the national service, which is the UK draft.
Oh God, no. This is
I know
control.
he's already a bad person, very transphobic, just a
Yeah.
big old prick.
Well, there's
from what I've
a
heard.
lot of things going on too. I want to add too, where it's like this is the resin filled straw. So it's like if somebody says like, oh well, we need to bring this back, we need to do that, we need, and then like, well, if you look at like how has this work? When has this ever been great? Just let me know, when is this ever good and great and good for humans? And where are humans responding well to this? Where are humans doing well to this? Where have humans been like, oh man, I'm really thriving now that we have a lot of boys that we murdered? Because those other boys would have murdered some other people, so we have to have the boys murder each other. Problem solved. Man, I feel so good about myself. Instead, it's like couched in this language of, oh, they made a huge sacrifice. Okay, they made a sacrifice. Interesting. Why? Why is that the only option? And when we know that we know, if you look at like neurological research, what we are doing, we know that we're exploiting boys. We know that it's the same age that they get involved in gangs. So think of it like, how is this special? This is a special case where we can exploit people this way. This way of exploitation is good, actually. And we should feel bad about other exploitation, but this one's good. This one's necessary, or else the exploitation will get so out of hand. That's what they're holding us threat with, is saying, if we don't exploit these people, everyone will get exploited, and that's how the world works. And I disagree. I fundamentally disagree, and I don't know why the world has to work like that. I don't believe that. I think that's bullshit.
And a lot of it is built into the media too. Think about like Top Gun, which is a really popular franchise.
Yeah.
That is basically, recruitment ads. A lot of the
Yes.
most popular franchise, like a lot of like stuff, like there's a WWE movie, The Marine. Like there's just a lot of movies where military. Yay, military. Yeah, there's some movies where you have the effects of all that being shown.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want cooperation from the U.S. military government, then you gotta show the military in a good light.
Yeah, show them in a good light, and they're basically saying like, if you care about people and what happens to them, then you will care about these people who we've exploited. I'm like, I do care about these people that you exploited, but you're saying, oh, but see, we brainwashed them so that nobody thinks we exploited them. See, their family doesn't think we exploited them. So don't say that. Don't say that they're exploited. That will make them feel bad. I'm like, but you did exploit them.
And recently I went to this event that was, honestly, can I ask something of you?
Yeah.
Like, there's like a lot of honoring of veterans. I keep seeing these veterans charities ads coming up, and Memorial Day is tomorrow. It's also my mom's birthday tomorrow.
Oh, that's nice. I care more about the birthday. Yay, happy birthday to your mom.
I know, I'll tell you said that. But, like, where does honoring veterans go too far for you? Where is it possible to go too far in that regard? Where does it, like...
I would have a completely different sentiment. So it's like honoring...
I don't know. I honestly don't know. This is a young person question here.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Please,
oh, sure. Okay.
Please in the chat, don't judge me for this.
Yeah, no, yeah. This is a good question. And also, yeah, people should not do that anyway. But like, okay, yes.
I just get nervous about it.
Yeah, completely understand. And thank you for expressing your feelings about that too, because you're responding to real bullshit. I will just also stand up and say, if anyone wants to do that, come at me. I have years behind me to throw around. So if somebody wants to come, just no, we aren't doing that here. Okay. So anyways, yeah. So the way to look at it is not good for people to die. Correct? We don't like that.
Yeah.
Even in the case where somebody is a danger to themselves and other people, it's probably not awesome to see it as a retributive process where we're going to get revenge against them. We don't know why people kill other people and hurt other people on a fundamental level, and you don't want to devolve into good and evil arguments. That's not it. That's not helpful, because then you're looking for scapegoats and you're framing everything in moral relative terms of like, my society thinks this is evil, therefore these people are all the same. They're all evil. They're all bad, right? So you start to do black and white thinking and dualistic thinking where there's like a good person and a bad person, and you have to figure out which is which and all this. Okay, no. So we can agree that humans losing their lives when they are not a threat to themselves and other people is particularly horrific and a form of torture of people that are alive. So when we see that our species does that, any part of our species even argues we have to necessitate that has to be what it is. That is a form of torture for all of us who are alive. If they're dead, they don't have to deal with that anymore. We do have to imagine, like, oh, what they could have contributed, what they would have liked to do, feeling the loss on their behalf of the things that they wanted that they'll never get to have, or that they lost in the process of losing their lives, right? The things that they enjoyed. So we can have empathy for that while acknowledging that the conditions that make that more likely to be the outcome are not doing us any favors, and we shouldn't act like we didn't make them. People make the conditions where a lot of people die. People make that happen. Outside of this isn't an act of nature. This isn't a hurricane. This is decisions made by people, enacted in law. And we don't have the guts to say that we don't want to be that kind of thing anymore that does that to people. And so I see it all as a tragedy. And to honor the lives of those people, I imagine that they got to live on a world nothing like ours. How wonderful that would have been for them. That's what I hold on to, and that's why I move towards that direction too, insisting that that's what we should aim for, is a world that we can't even imagine, instead of saying, oh, well, they died because they had to, and therefore we need to make sure that we honor them. I'm like, well, the most wonderful thing I could do is, if we really valued them, was to put them in a place unlike this one that would just kill them.
Yeah. Even, like, you know, if the sacrifice is, like, you know, noble. I went to this event recently where they were doing a thing honoring Japanese American World War II vets.
Yeah.
It was very sweet and kind and all that, but I was also left feeling kind of hollow. Like, I get the importance of this, but also, I don't know.
It's an apology that these people
to have.
No, you can have you can have very conflicted feelings about that. That is an apology that those men had to watch their friends die horrifically. Nobody should have to feel that way. Nobody should have to go through that. And if we say to them, oh, it was all worth it, okay, that's one thing. And I want these people to know that, like, they did the best that they could to try to prevent something more catastrophic. But the conditions are not much better. We still haven't resolved that. And so have we really honored them when they're like, oh, there's some boys experiencing what you did right now. Right now. And we signed off on it. And now we apologize to you for the rest of your lives. So we'll apologize to them for the rest of their lives. Does that feel like good enough? Does that make you feel good? Does that pay you back for what we took away from you? And how could it ever? How could it ever? So I think a lot of it is a confused and conflicted attempt to grapple with our inability and refusal to change our society in fundamental ways and radical ways. And some people just don't believe it's possible. And I think those people are jaded sociopaths, very indoctrinated.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay to say that I don't want people to be like that. I genuinely believe people are capable of something greater than this. And I
also believe in the power of humanity. Like,
yeah.
As much as the world sucks and there are a lot of sucky people out there, there are just as many people out there who are pushing to make genuine changes, and it's inspiring to see.
Right. So I think like that's where we can focus, and anybody who's been through that as a veteran, they're going to process it the way they're going to process it. I haven't been through that. I don't have a lens on that, so it's like they're going to deal with it in various ways. Some people have attitudes similar to what I'm talking about right now, and even more emphatically, and would be even more severe in their condemnation of this. So I think that we shy away from this conversation because we've hurt these people so much, and we've hurt their families so much, that they're like, well, don't hurt them by saying the wrong thing. And it's like, wow, that's your solution? Is just to give them words, not actually change anything?
Yeah, like, I have a cousin who serves in the military. He was in, like, the Iraq War, I don't recall which one. But, like, you know, I've never met him, honestly. He's still alive, but I've never met him. So I don't know, like, what his opinions are and all that.
I think that humans do not have a high enough level of concern for the well-being of other people. That is my blanket statement. That will say, well, we have concern for the well-being of other people, but we still want our toys. We still want guns. They're fun. Pew, pew, pew. We still want this. It makes me feel good. I still want this story. I want to do that story. I want to be in ancient Greece. I want to be a Roman soldier. Like, okay, that's dope that you can't care enough about the well-being of other people to stop saying, but this is fun, but this is cool, but this is nice. And if we don't stop doing it, sunk cost fallacy, it'll almost be like it was all nonsense, that it was all just a thing that we could have actually stopped in some way if we wanted to enough, if we cared enough about people's well-being enough to do that. So I hold it to humans. I don't know why we're so bad at caring about others' well-being to the extent that we are, but I strongly believe that's our problem as a species. And
Probably
I won't eat. Oh, go ahead.
Honestly, most humans, to a certain extent, are very self-centered, and part of it probably is some sort of like
survival instinct, you
It
know.
could be.
Look out for number one.
It could be, but I mean, but that's the other thing is like, so what I don't think us being self-centered is a problem because we only have a perspective from ourselves. How are you supposed to center
True.
something that you can't see? So when
But then it's also a lot of learned behavior.
yes,
So,
well,
the government.
exactly. So how we teach ourselves to approach the world is more what I hold in contempt, is what we've said, oh, nope, that's the way we should teach it. Or because we do this, it must be natural, and therefore, instead of saying like, well, you're not allowing us to have the testing conditions of other things. So while I am saying something critical of my species and overall of my species, I'm not saying that I'm immune or exempt, but I am saying I don't want to learn from this species as it is, how to deal with my own nature, my own behaviors. I don't want to learn from them. I don't think they've got it. I don't think they've got it at all. So that's where I get at it. It's like people fighting in the poison lake. It's like, oh, well, humans can only make poison lakes, but the real problem isn't the poison; it's all of the ripples on the lake. So we'll just argue about which ripple is worse. And like I think I can get criticized for being too abstract and being too judgmental or something like that. But it's like, no, I don't think y'all got it. I don't think what you're doing makes sense. And even in so much as I am a part of this species and have the same problems, I don't want to learn how to deal with my problems from people that act like that. I don't want to reproduce that. And I'm not going to take kindly to people who are like, oh, it's really sad and tragic, but also let's keep doing it. That's a no-go for me. That's ridiculous.
Like, I went to this event for honoring Japanese American veterans, and they had this speaker who was honored at a university. I'm not going to name which one because I don't want to dox myself. But they had the speaker who was Palestinian, and she was tying in the struggles of the Palestinians with the, Japanese American veterans and internment camps and their struggles. And she was saying, like, it's not complicated. This is a genocide. This, like, your struggles, it's the same struggles. And, like, you can focus on the ripples on the lake, the differences, or you can focus on the similarities and try to help.
Yeah, and
in whatever ways.
And when you focus on the similarities and you try to help, you might have to say some stuff that people like will not respond very well to, where it's like you have to go to these ideas, and I would just encourage people to do so, that say, no, humans can do better than this. And I'm not naive. I have years under my belt. I have some perspective on some of these aspects. I'm not going to be perfect at this, but you can find people with the experiences you would want who would say something similar to me. They exist. this is a conclusion you can make just looking at our species behavior from this top-down resin filled straw vibe that I've been talking about, and say like, yeah, this is a reasonable interpretation of our species. I'm good owning that, and I also think that like a lot of our conversations are kind of no-goes or non-starters because it's just like I don't understand why we're like soldiers, good idea. Yeah, let's keep going. We have to have soldiers because if we don't have soldiers, they'll indoctrinate soldiers. Okay, so what do you need to change that? And they're like, oh, well, you need authoritarian control. I'm like, that didn't make any sense. Like, why? Why can't you tell people about the world as best as we know it, sharing information? Why don't we do that? We can translate languages quickly. Why aren't we trying to make a composite image of what the world really is? And we can try to be like, what kind of lake are we swimming in? Oh, we poisoned the lake. Can we stop poison? Are we poisoning the lake? Probably. That's where that metaphor should go. It's like, it's a poisoned lake. Okay, I can get some people to be like, yeah, okay, the lake is poisoned. Why is it poisoned? Can it be not poisoned? Are we doomed with it poisoned forever? Can we create something that will, take the poison situation out entirely, even if it's natural causes in some sense? Because we clearly hate it. Like, we hate the poisoned lake.
Yeah, you're saying a lot of very strong points. I don't really have much to add. You're really doing a lot of what I have to say, what you have to say.
Thank you. Yeah, and then I was thinking too, it's like we hate the poison lake so much that we'll say, if you stay in the poison lake your whole life, then you'll go to a magical non-poisoned lake in the sky or something. I was like, okay, that's a lot. That's an awful lot. That's necessary now too. And instead of and I'm down for people having a mystical interpretation and having some expressed beliefs about consciousness beyond. So not to criticize that can still be perfectly reasonable. However, you shouldn't use it as like a bargaining chip with people. It's like, man, you think this poison lake sucks? Wait until you get to go to Magic Land where there's no more poison and you feel nothing, like, and you're free from things that are actually basic human skills that we have made you unable to address. You're in so much pain, so we'll say, oh, one day you'll feel no pain at all, instead of being able to address your pain because that's what we evolved to be able to address, and you've set up circumstances where nobody can get them addressed. And then we're overwhelmed and in tremendous pain, and you're like, oh, don't worry, one day you just magically won't be a human at all. What?
Yeah, that is a lot.
Yeah. Anyways, so and it intersects with autism, and it's like, man. So okay, coping strategies. It's really hard to ignore our species being the way it is. It's really hard to have a breakdown of this kind and also be conscious that there's a lot of members of your species that would say like, oh, you shouldn't think that way, or you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't do that, right? I am in a conflict. I'm like, well, we have two legitimate points of view as far as I'm concerned in the abstract of like, I don't think they should be doing that. They don't think I should be doing this. That is just a basic disagreement. We disagree. Great. So I think the way to cope with this problem is to know that it's okay to disagree with most of your species. That's fine, especially when your species overall can't deal with the problems that it makes for itself. It's okay to disagree with your species' ideas when the ideas seem to be not deviating far enough away from the status quo that creates these problems to ever make something that you would agree is a good idea. So if I think that my species is doing a huge series of bad ideas, I should be able to say that. And if somebody says I disagree, I'm like, wow, lo and behold, disagreements exist. Like, it does not have to be anything more than that. And to make it bigger than that is, again, to be like, the ripples, but there's a ripple. Oh my God, it's a ripple. I'm like, yeah, the ripples keep happening. And I don't, like, water is wet. People disagree on things.
Mm-hmm. You just, there's like normal disagreements, but don't try to be toxic about it. Don't try to like, I don't know where I'm.
We don't know how to disagree. We don't know how to
Yeah.
disagree with people. It's ridiculous. It's like, well, I don't want anyone to disagree with me. I'm like, okay, that's an understandable one, but is it reasonable? Can you negotiate that with people? You can't do that. You can't be like, hey, you have to agree with me, or else here's all these consequences that do not follow from you disagreeing or agreeing with me. Like, or rewards. Same thing with the trophies. It's like, oh, I agree with your capitalist system. Here's a little trophy, do that doesn't even make sense for you to have.
It's like some people can't handle when their opinions are just, even when it's like an opinion on a TV show, when their opinions are challenged, some people can't handle it.
Right. Yeah,
and I hate that because it makes me, as someone who wants to cover entertainment, nervous because if I say the wrong thing about a show, I'm worried,
Yeah.
what will happen to me.
Well, it's like
if I say something wrong.
Yeah, quote unquote wrong, when it's like you have a different resin-filled straw than that person. Nobody's going to have the exact same resin-filled straw if we use this metaphor, right? You believe certain things have happened that they don't believe have happened, and vice versa. You know with strong confidence that certain things have happened that they have no idea have happened. So you have a different set of things to look down. And whenever you're in like an audience role in a movie theater, you are definitely one of one. You are just the only person seeing the movie that way. So when we have to have like some sort of like what's the word I'm looking for? We all have to have the same experience of how we interpret the new information. That's not realistic. What would be better is to say like, oh, are you interested in learning why I see it this way? I'll try to describe it to the best of my knowledge. I may not succeed. I may not even have that insight, but I'll try. And then then likewise, the person can explain if you want to do that, which a lot of times I think people don't want to do that, which is fine. There's lots of things we can be doing, and we don't have to be deep diving on why somebody holds this opinion. It's okay to say like, I simply disagree, and maybe we don't care enough to understand why we disagree, or try to, which we may never be able to succeed at, and that is also just a part of life that we need to accept.
And the more people learn to accept that, the more people who want to cover that sort of stuff will be able to feel safe on the internet, which is something like, I don't want to be someone who's on my streams talking about my opinions and stuff and worrying, did I say the wrong thing? Are they going to hunt me down? Are they going to start, like, in the back of my mind, that's always a thing that's there. It's like, if I say the wrong thing, will someone attempt to hunt me down?
Right.
Dox me.
Yeah. Like, will somebody think that the appropriate thing to do is to now hurt you, or to pretend that they don't realize that you have like desires, pretend that they don't understand that you have needs, pretend that like it's like somebody who can't okay, I have a couple theories I won't go too deep into.
It's why I brought up what I brought up earlier when I said, don't go after me.
Yeah, right. And it's so sad that you have to think this way, because wasn't normal before.
Another creator go through this. If you've heard of Lily Orchard recently, she made a video about this anime Delicious in Dungeons where she was negative about it.
Right.
And its main character, and as a result, some fans of the show hunted her down on 2 of her Tumblrs, got her Tumblrs like completely blocked, tried to dox her. Like, she's already been through a bunch of harassment streaks for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
But like that's just,
well, and then there's questions about like who gets targeted or who gets selected as a target for stalking. It's not just arbitrary, right? So that person,
because like she's a trans Native American, Native woman. She's from Canada. So I'm sure that plays a part in it too. And she's also had negative opinions about another popular show, Steven Universe. She's just been a lightning rod for controversy. Feel free to look her up on her own. There's a lot of divisive opinions out there about her.
Well, and then maybe a good place to kind of end is to talk a little bit about the idea of like controversy, which gets brought up a lot right now. So I think it sounds a little bit better than when people are saying drama, like people will call things drama over and over again. Controversy has at least a little bit less of a, I guess, I'm trying to think of the right way to put this.
Stigma?
Yeah, stigma, and like definitely, yeah, stigma that is meant to minimize something. Like drama is very dismissive, derisive, derisive, yeah, derisive or derisive. And then what I wonder is happening with this is like we're like, oh well, now we can acknowledge that controversies are happening, but I'm like, but why is this happening in the first place? Like why is something controversial? Why are people responding? Who is responding? Not everybody responds to a controversial thing. And we're not looking at like who is attracted to this. Are people attracted to this at certain phases of their lives and then not? How does this contribute to us dealing with problems like our own impairments or disabilities or struggles? Like, is this a distraction from that? Like, is this a maladaptive coping mechanism for our own lives?
It could be. A lot of it is also like, you know, people are throwing around, I don't know, like there's a lot of stuff. I've been following her on Tumblr when her Tumblr was still there. It's not anymore. But I've been trying to follow the situation as best I could. But like there's been a lot of like, she'd been getting a lot of asked about some stuff she'd made in the past, and like, or like, I'm not the best person to really go over the history of this, honestly. Just a background observer.
Well, and I don't think you should have to either, by the way. Like, we're not reporters, you know? Why are we all in the role of like almost like why are we all the nightly news of shitty things that happen, and why aren't we taking on the role of a researcher instead? Right? So why don't we then say like, why is this happening? Not from like a, oh, I'm so good at analyzing, but like, do we want this to continue to happen? Is this having a good consequence on the people involved? Is this having a good consequence on the people watching it? Is this having a good consequence in the abstract, when you like the fact that this is happening so often, that this keeps happening in all, like, why are we doing this? And I don't see that where it's like we take responsibility as a species for the shit that we're doing, even if it's not you doing it directly. Somebody has to say like, okay, well, if you don't do it directly, why don't you do it? And don't say like, oh, I don't do it, therefore I'm better, yada yada. But be like, well, I don't do this, I think it's bad, it seems like it hurts us. Like, for example, I don't drink. Okay, then you can be like, okay, well, why don't you drink? And then I can be like, well, here's all the things that my brain did to not want to drink. If anybody else wants to try not drinking. And then we can try doing other stuff instead of these things where it's like, when is this looking like a good idea and how?
BT Dubs, I'm gonna pop off in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, you got your stream. Yeah. I'm gonna pop off too, just end on time. Yeah, and then I was saying, Jamie was saying, it's also like maybe as an autistic, I see people getting attention or money from saying that they say and saying what they say, and so therefore what they're saying must be the correct thing. Then they sit on stream, say something, people agree and bond, decide to be friends, and then they use the people who disagree as a witch hunt. That's bonkers. Like, that behavior is bonkers. Like, I don't think that is a worthwhile thing to do. I think it is harmful. I don't even have any interest in hearing someone argue for it, because people are not choosing to participate in that. That's like this major thing of like, oh, we all understand consent until we suddenly don't, right? It's like some people don't want to.
Very fucked up.
Yeah.
Very fucked up. Let me just be entirely honest.
Yeah. Some people don't want to interact with a person that acts like that. And in a normal context, you can just never hang out with them. And now we have people hunting down other individuals being like, oh, but you're not doing what I want you to do. I'm like, wow, what if you learned how to deal with people not doing what you want them to do? Like, genuinely. And then you don't have to do things that are so outside of normal, so outside of reasonable. Like, I don't want people to attack me, right? Randomly stalk me, whatever. I don't want that. That's a very understandable thing that I don't want, right? I think me having to deal with that want not being satisfied is more of an issue than somebody not wanting somebody to disagree, and therefore then they get to do this stuff. I just want it to stop. I'm not going to then retaliate because I don't want that behavior to happen. So why would I then do it?
Yep. Same. I don't want that. Because my reactions now would be like, not good, honestly.
Right.
I don't know what I do, but it would not be good for me, and I live with other people. I live with a family.
Right.
I don't want them to get involved in something because of me.
Right. And you don't no, it's like, it's not, oh man. We should be able to teach people how to know that other people have wants and that those people can say no to you, and that doesn't give you license to do things to them that they don't want. That's not how that works. And that's what it is. It's, oh, they did something I don't want. I'm going to do something to them that they don't want because they did something that I didn't want. Okay, well, most of the time what you actually needed to work on was being able to understand that other people have wants, and if you want to work with that, you have to negotiate like mature adults. And if you can't do that with the person, probably the best thing you can do is forget they exist and do other more productive things.
Yep. Like, I understand being controlling, having controlling tendencies. I kind of have that problem myself, and I am working on it. Let me be perfectly clear, I am working on it. But you shouldn't try to force yourself on others. You should try to, like, work within their schedules. This weekend, I've been working within my family's schedules. My siblings have things going on. So I am working within that. Tomorrow is my mom's birthday. I am working within that. I'm doing my best to work within the schedules while still being able to do the things I like to do.
Right.
That should be how other people are able to do things.
Yes, and it is a skill that you need to work on, and sometimes it will be easier than other times, and sometimes the person you're working with will have mismatches in how their skill has developed where it's even harder, and you have really, these are all parts of how maturity ought to be. Because why? Because we're capable of it. For one, as humans, we can do this, and for two, it's not enjoyable to walk around in a world that almost arbitrarily hurts other people, and you also have to watch people hurt themselves. I don't like it. I don't want to do that. I am advocating for something different. That you can process your feelings of not getting what you want without having to hurt yourself or anybody else. That this is usually possible, with exceptions where we're getting into the realm of, like, I think that's literally torture. But, you know, like, I think people need to spend, I would advocate that humans spend a lot more time sitting down and categorizing these abstract ideas. Like, when is it an issue of, like, I have a need? When is it an issue of I have a want? When is it an issue of I'm asking for this want to be met by the wrong person? And can you handle that? And can you deal with that? Is there a solution? Do you need to advocate for change? What do you have to do to appropriately respond to the situation? And sometimes that's really hard. I'm trying to figure that out with autism. I don't think that our needs are getting met, let alone the things that we want. I think we have a problem with that. So how do I deal with that? I don't fully know. But while I would want that to already be solved, it's not. And I need to deal with that. That is my responsibility, and I should feel enough confidence in my maturity to take that on at this point. I had good mentors modeling it. At this point, I probably can start to do some amount of mentoring and modeling it for other people, so we can work on this collaboratively. But I just think, like, that would change everything. And I've had mentors model similar ideas, or very, very identical ideas even, and say this would change everything. This would make things so much better for everyone if we learned how to respond to a no in a healthy way, and know when we have something that we want versus something that we need.
Okay. Do you mind if I end things here?
Yes, go for it. Go start your stream.
You gonna end your stream too? You said
Yeah,
you wanted to end on time?
I will. I have like one viewer, so I would raid, but Andrew,
You
just
can,
go over there.
honestly, you can still,
I can
you
still
can just
raid.
like go.
Okay.
Yeah, let me set up. Like, you can still do a raid. I've never honestly been raided
Oh, okay.
before. Like, I
Okay.
don't think so. Like,
I'll
I
try
need
raiding.
to. Yeah, let me just set it up.
Okay.
It should be up in a minute.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no rush. I'll check to see, and then I'll see when you're ready.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks for the chat, though. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye. Okay, all right. Anyways, so yeah. So that was fun. I enjoyed that. It kind of was a little more unstructured today because the earlier chat partners had stuff to do today, more or less, so we had a little bit more wiggle room to go through different topics. But yeah, thanks for being here, Andrew. Yeah, it's like I'm in a weird processing space that I know is I'm not alone. Like, things are weird now, right? Like, you have more years on the planet than I do. This is weird. Like, this isn't great. We're not doing the best, right? I understand there must have been periods of stress, but like, what is this? Okay, and now I'm putting away the components of my wedding dress because it was on a dress form that I need to return to my aunt. She loaned me a dress form so that I could start building the dress up. And I was storing it on there for a little while. Now I gotta give it back. Okay, let me set up the raid in a second. I'm gonna end the stream on YouTube.